You're listening to episode 211 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today we're speaking with Sky, the Arcanum. This is the second coffee chat I've done on the show. We cover a lot of ground. It's a pretty lengthy conversation, so either bump up the speed if you're into that, or if you can't get enough of this podcast, then just kick back and enjoy it. Maybe listen in segments. Sky is really fun to talk to because he's done a lot of different experiments like I have. He actually shares his experience of blacking out while he was vegan and the thought process that brought him to ketosis and this low carb way of eating. But he also emphasizes balance. So introducing carb cycling, not being zero carb or no carb for weeks or months on end, but actually introducing it once or twice a week and reaping the benefits. So he is a fan of carb cycling, and he explains why. He explains the 4 different ways that we can get into ketosis, why he uses the finger prick method to measure his ketones instead of urine or breath. He talks about how to detoxify amyloid plaque in the brain, the benefits of butyrate, the best way to utilize methylene blue, how often to use it. He shares his thoughts on autophagy, AMPK, mTOR, and then a lot of practical stuff like what does he eat in a day and his favorite methods of detoxifying the body. So enjoy the show. Here is Sky. All right, we are here with Sky of the Arcanum. Welcome to the show.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a really cool one. We've been chatting back and forth for several weeks about ketosis, and I think you've been experimenting with it recently, longer than I have. I played with it back in the day, but it was more in the context of intermittent fasting, and then I was essentially carb refeeding with beans and soy for 1 hour every day, which was kind of an extreme protocol. So I don't know if I've ever done like full ketosis like I'm doing now, which is kind of aiming to keep my net carbs under 30 grams a day. It's kind of a challenge when you realize, carbohydrates are in so many things.
Oh yeah, it could definitely be that. I've been doing it for what are we at now? I haven't even been keep track of the days, but so I first went low carb. Let's say close to spring of last year, and I've been in the know of all this information for like 6 years now, 5-6 years. And at first I was thinking to myself, no way, this is legit. This sounds awful. Like I can't let go of carbs. That carbs are essential. They're the one macronutrient that makes me feel good. I had so many I had so many thoughts in my head that were stopping me from progressing further. But nonetheless, I found it fascinating that people would do it. There was one person in particular that really, two people that really caught my attention at first. And the first one was Courtney Hunt. She's awesome. And then the other one was that guy, what's his name? Manuel, the crazy guy who's always talking about Jesus and
Martin Cabello.
Martin Cabello, there you go, that guy. That guy is a freaking character. So I just kept them in my rear view while I was doing my thing. And Courtney's always spoken super rationally, so I'm interested in other people's perspectives. I don't think that anything is right or wrong as far as people's personal regimens go. I find it interesting that the human body can be so flexible and so resilient in in different environments. Depending on the context, the body will do different things. It'll adjust, and it gets really good at doing these things. So one person's experience will differ from the next person's experience. And there's a lot of context to be considered there. There's a lot of bioindividuality that you got to take into account, people's genes. There's so much there. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And time and time again, you can see the same or very similar results replicated as people adopt the same regimen as the person before them that was experimenting with something like keto or fruitarianism or whatever. It's like all these things are just a different experience that people are having, and there's a lot of information that we can extrapolate from that. So I'm super big on that. I love to see how things work, and I've been that way since I was young. Robotics always fascinated me as well. So I kind of have that perspective from an early age that I like to take things apart and put them back together and see how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So
what?
Oh yeah.
Oh, keep going. Yeah.
I was just gonna finish off that thought with so I started going, I would say full keto around Thanksgiving last year, because I finally just got tired of eating carbs, and if I would eat just enough carbs to stay in ketosis, but I wasn't testing myself. I was just eating such a low amount that I couldn't help but go into it. And I was having a lot of these roadblocks, which we'll get into a little later. Some people call it keto flu. And there's a whole medley, or a wide array, I should say, of different things that happen to people based off of taking out macronutrients. And it definitely happened to me. So I kept bumping my head, so to speak. And then I finally figured it out. But I think I started tinkering, last March, last April, around there. And then I finally went full blown around Thanksgiving last year.
What was your motivation for doing it? Because from what I've seen, like when I search on YouTube, keto diet or whatever, I find like most of the videos will be about weight loss. And then some will be about longevity. Would you say those are like the two main motivations for people looking into it? Or?
That tends to be the lowest barrier of entry for people. It's easy for people to relate with brain fog or a lot of belly fat or stuff like that. Those seem to be the most common things that I hear people talk about. And then I hear the counter arguments to that quite often, being that, oh, you shouldn't go keto because if you do and then you go off of it, you're going to gain all the weight back. And this is too specific of a claim for people to make to really understand, for them to really understand what's happening behind the scenes. Like, you can't just say, oh, if you go keto and then you get off keto, you're going to gain the weight back. That's being completely ignorant of people's lifestyle choices and whether they choose to eat 20 cookies in a day or something like that. Like, I mean, and you'll see there's so much nuance to it that you can't go and say that, because I can prove you wrong. My life is a testament to that. I literally ate a pizza last night and I'm still in ketosis right now. I ate a whole pizza. I mean, I'm just telling you right now, it's not that I don't eat carbs. It's just, I've figured it out. At least for myself, I've definitely figured it out. And before I even say that, I'll say I've been experimenting more with eating carbs, and I'll go like a week and a half full keto, and then I'll take my reading about every day and see what causes my ketone levels to elevate, what causes them to stabilize. They say I do a blood prick on the finger when I test, and there's a few different ways to test. You can test your urine, not too accurate. The breath is a little more accurate. That tends to be not as accurate later down the road, because your body will get so good at using ketones for fuel that it won't need to produce as high of a amount of acetone, which is what you're measuring through the breath. So your reading will actually diminish quite a bit if your body does that. It's different for everybody. But the blood prick has been super accurate for me. And there's a threshold that you can actually play with where, and they have different classifications for these things. They have like, I think it's 0.5 to 3.0 millimoles. And that's what they consider to be nutritional ketosis, which is an optimal state you'd want to be in. Realistically, this is not so much cut and dry as they make it seem, but according to what they say, that's the threshold. And then from 3 to 5 is what they call therapeutic ketosis. I've heard people call it starvation ketosis. There's a lot of names for it. Essentially, that's like the fasting state. So those are the levels you'll probably be within if you've been fasting more than 2 days. And then 5 and above, those are ranges for ketoacidosis. And that's normally what people will reference when they say, oh, keto is bad, ketoacidosis, things like that. But again, it's not so cut and dry. Like, to say that that's bad is to completely neglect all the other factors, the contributing factors to that. And realistically, ketoacidosis is an issue because that's usually diabetic. And the diabetic people will have elevated insulin, elevated glucose, right? And then they'll also have elevated ketones as well, which is a recipe for disaster. Those level of ketones plus extremely high blood sugar levels is bad. But again, now we're getting more into the nuance of stuff. But
have you measured your blood glucose too? Or
I haven't, and I'm not even so worried about that. I will, just for the sake of it, just because I want to see what it is, but I can feel it. I mean, I don't really need a meter to tell me what I'm feeling. The only reason I even did the ketone meter was because I wanted to be able to fine tune, I guess you can say, how I was approaching refeeding myself carbs and things like that, and seeing how that would affect my ketone levels specifically. But I can feel when I have elevated insulin, when I have elevated blood sugar levels. That's all something that I'm pretty well acquainted with. And the ketone monitoring has confirmed this for me, because I've been in ketosis way longer than this. And I've done it over the last few years, countless times, where I would fast, where I would do different type of dietary regimens, where I was doing extremely low sugar, really. And I always ran into the same problems, like we'll get it more into. But that leads me into my first point that I wanted to make regarding that is there's actually 4 different ways to get into ketosis. So the first one, or I'll just go down the list, I guess. It's no calorie, low calorie, no carbs, low carbs. And if you fall within those 4, you're most likely going to end up in ketosis if you go long enough. Some of those are a lot quicker ways to access ketosis, and then others are a lot more gradual. So you'll end up getting into ketosis if you do it long enough, but that's also contingent upon a few other factors, like whether or not you're consuming just enough carbohydrates to keep you from getting into it. And then some days you don't eat enough, so you'll slip into that, but you're still playing with the teeter-totter there, and that doesn't feel too good. You'll get a lot of hypoglycemic signaling in the brain, and there's a bunch of alarms that go off in the body, and you start feeling super lethargic. Since you're not consuming so many carbohydrates, your body's not retaining as much water. So you actually need to consume more water and more electrolytes, but you don't realize that because you're so used to consuming carbohydrates and operating that way. So that is one thing I noticed a lot of people do, is that they expect their body to function the same way as when they were consuming carbohydrates, but they don't take the time to learn about how the body operates in contrast to eating carbs and not eating carbs. So that's one thing I found out really early on, years ago, and I just recently made the correlation within my brain. To answer your question, though, because I tend to get derailed a little bit, why I started doing this in the first place was my brain wasn't at peak performance. I found that I would have moments of it where I felt I felt clarity, and I felt that I was optimized, so to speak. But then I would have other moments where I was just lethargic. I had brain fog, and I couldn't shake that constant teeter-tottering feeling. And just to give a little bit of background, I've done so many different dietary regimens, similar to you, where I've experimented with it all. I've gone on a Dr. Sebi protocol for like 2 years or something like that, where I was doing like no starch, and I was vegan. And then I did like a whole year where I was just juicing 64 ounces of green juice every morning and eating pretty much only juice and some fruits. I don't know if you consider that fruitarian or whatever, but it was definitely not the business. It was not for me. And then I did another one where I was just like vegan for 2 years. And when I say vegan, I was eating honey and stuff, but whatever. I mean, we can nitpick it all we want, but I definitely restricted a lot of macros during that time frame. I didn't eat meat for like 5.5 years or something like that. And the whole time I would constantly, I would get this, what is it, like a head rush, or my blood pressure would drop when I get up really quick. And so for like 5.5 years, man, I was dealing with this thing, and I probably had it longer than that now that I think about it. But I would be laying down or sitting down on the couch, and I get up, and I would feel like death for a few moments. And what really catalyzed me to change my whole lifestyle when I was doing that to where I am now was one day I got up real quick to go to the kitchen because my phone was ringing, and I left it in the kitchen. I get up to answer the phone, and I did, without even thinking about it, I got to the kitchen. The kitchen and the living room were pretty close to each other at my mom's house. And by the time I got into the kitchen, my vision went white. I whited out. And when I came back to, I found that I blacked out, and I was on the kitchen floor. Turns out I had fainted, crashed into my mom's big metal trash can, one of those ones with the lid that you can step on the pedal and it opens up. I had crashed into it, bent it in half, and I was seizing on the floor. I came back to, and I was seizing. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, this isn't normal. And I was doing everything, quote unquote, right? Like, I was, what the vegans say is like, you just weren't doing it right. Like, bro, I've done it all. Believe me, man. And it wasn't working, man. So from that point on, something clicked. And this is something that I actually realized later down the road, because if you're familiar with how trauma affects the brain, trauma actually causes your personality to split, so to speak. It causes fractures in your personality. And when you receive trauma, whether it's like a car crash or someone hits you on the head or whatever it is, man, trauma will cause your personality to shift. And from what I've been seeing in the actual neurological studies, it's seemingly permanent. So if you have trauma, your personality changes permanently. you're no longer the same person anymore. So like I received trauma that morning. And when I got up from the floor, I wasn't the same person anymore, or personality had shifted. So I started feeling like I needed to make a shift. And then I started eating meat again. You know, I was already connected to you back then. And I saw that you had made some dietary shifts, and I still hadn't done it for myself, but the idea was already there. It was a seed. And yeah, that led me more and more. But like I said, I never shook the brain fog. I never shook the lethargy. I never shook any of those things that I was still dealing with back then. And even prior to those dietary regimens that I had adopted, actually had went vegan so that I could fix those things, and I didn't. So then I started eating meat. Things got better, but it wasn't until I actually went keto that all these things magically fix themselves. And as I later came to find out, the body knows everything. The body knows everything that it needs, everything that it needs to do. It's autonomous, and we seem to get in its way. So when that realization hit me, I was like, oh, I need to get out of the body's way, because it already knows what it's doing. I just keep fucking it up because oops, I shouldn't have said that. All right. Well,
it's all good.
I kept messing it up, and the idea that really resonated with me the most about ketosis is that when you remove carbohydrates from your regimen, it seems that the body has to find a way to adapt. Because if you can see yourself as a person who's been doing the same thing for your whole life, and then you completely switch it up and you take the one thing out that you've always been eating, your body is going to go through some drastic shifts. And that was what really enticed me, because I listened to Courtney Hunt. She, bless her soul, man, she's awesome. She said something one day that really intrigued me, where I heard her mention that the carbohydrates that everybody consumes were the one thing holding humanity back from getting to where it needs to be to make the leap. Because she was relating it to humanity being type 0 civilization, type 1. I'm sure you've heard of, I think Michio Kaku talks about it a lot, where if humanity is to progress any further, it has to turn into a type 1 civilization and proceed. And the only way to do that is to elevate consciousness, quite literally. And there's this huge fear of AI in this world for some reason. And it tends to go hand in hand with the spiritual community, where they, and I'm not just picking on like spiritual people, because there's like a whole plethora of people. There's like the New Age people, there's Christian people, there's dogmatic people of all kinds. And they seem to think that AI is like the doom of humanity. And that's already putting us on a crash course, so to speak. But realistically, there's really nothing that you can do to stop what's coming. Humanity is progressing and it's evolving, and it's going to reach a type 1 civilization if we do the right things. I'm not a proponent, so to speak, of putting robot arms like Dr. Tavius on my back or something. But I mean, even though the idea sounds cool, I see that humanity is going to progress with or without my input. That's just the truth. And the sooner a lot of people swallow that pill, the sooner you'll be able to look inward and just think about what you need to do to optimize your brain so that you can see what's really going on. Because if humanity progresses and you don't progress, it's not that you're really going to be left behind. You were already left behind to begin with. And it gets really quantum. And I won't go into it too much, but if you can see yourself as the protagonist in your movie, so to speak, if you don't have the ability to process information so that you can see what it is that you need to do to heal your brain, so that you can see things a lot more clearly, then you're never going to progress as an individual. And then civilization itself won't progress either, because there are millions of other people just like you that are quantumly entangled. And if you can see humans as like a hive species, there's a lot of literature on this stuff. There's one particularly that I like. It's the 100th monkey effect, where humans are being related to this species of chimpanzee, right? It was the chimpanzee with the nut, and they taught the chimpanzee to wash the nut, and then the chimpanzee was realizing that it was edible, and then it started eating this nut. And then around the same time, all around the world, the same species of chimpanzee started to do the same thing, right? So it showed that animals are they're connected on a quantum level. What is it? Through the morphogenic field. So I started relating myself to that as well, because there's a lot of truth there. Humans have a collective memory, and we all seem to feed into this field, so to speak. It's an electromagnetic field, and humans, just like other animals, are intimately connected on that level. So whether you realize it or not, you're inputting information into this library, so to speak. And it's like a feedback system. Humans feed off of that. And it's easy to say that like humanity isn't progressing because people are doing all the bad things. But until you do the thing that can really help you elevate your own life to where it needs to go, you won't really know how you can help humanity until you really do that. So I used to be that person where I would see humanity as like a fallen species, and that we were on a crash course to a really bad place. And then I thought about it. I'm like, well, I could do something to better my own life. And that all starts with healing the brain. And the reason I even brought up Courtney Hunt was because she said she always talks about healing the brain. So I was like, man, is my brain really messed up? I used to try to put myself on a pedestal, like, no, I've definitely advanced. I'm a lot more advanced than a lot of people because I was vegan and stuff like that. And that's not the case at all. I was having a seizure, and that's not really optimal health in my perspective. So
yeah, that's great points. You made me think of like adaptability too, because when I was the last couple of years, I've been tied to food, like meal prep, snacking, like on the AI stuff. Like if we're not, if our body is not adaptable to going periods without any food, and your body isn't able to tap into this huge energy source, which is your own body fat, then I mean, on the fractal kind of idea that you're sharing, that would make us less adaptable to the changing world that we're heading into all the time.
Oh, right. And it's widely accepted. This is a known fact. Pretty much everyone at this point is in agreement that the world is changing and it's not going back to where it used to be. We're entering a new age, so to speak, of humanity. But that is a really good point. We should talk about that. And this goes into why I ended up making the leap into what I'm currently doing now. So if you can look at humanity, humans, Homo sapien, there's a really cool book that I recommend almost everybody to read. It's called Everything You Know Is Wrong by Lloyd Pye. Rest in peace. He passed away not too long ago. And in this book, he breaks down all the different species of hominids and how they have different qualities that make them unique, right? Homo sapiens are hominids as well. And how every single hominid had defining characteristics that really set it apart from other hominids. And I found it fascinating because these different species of hominids would vary substantially from the next. Some of them were upright, other ones live on all fours. they have a lot more body hair, some have less body hair, they have different tendencies. I mean, it just goes on. I highly recommend people read that book. It opened my mind. And there's some stuff that I won't spoil at the end of that book that really shook me spiritually. But I read that book in like 2011. And since I read that book, I couldn't shake this notion that humanity is a product of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of microevolution. I won't even get into the macroevolution. Like that's for each person to make their own educated conclusion decision on. I highly encourage everybody to have intelligent thought and to just interact with your own brain that way. But on the microevolutionary scale, humans have evolved from different hominids, and we've done so in such a way where it changed not only how we distribute our weight on our feet, but how we interact with the environments around us. We have much less body hair. I mean, like, I could go on, but these characteristics really spoke to me, that humans are not like other hominids, and that we have developed over time to be able to interact with our environments differently than our predecessors. And that humans on a genetic level have, I guess you could call it ancestral memory, where we are the product of thousands of years of evolution. And all that evolution is stored within us. That memory is stored within us. So we, as humans, have the ability to adapt to different stressors in the environment, different environments based off of geographical locations and so on and so forth. So that has a lot of implications, namely because the food that's available in those geographic locations varies substantially. You have people in Siberia that had access to almost no carbohydrates, and they would hunt all the time. And they would also clothe themselves differently, interact with their world a lot differently than people who lived on the equator that would eat coconuts all the time. And, you know, there's a lot of difference there. But nonetheless, humans are able to adapt. And that's the common denominator there. So I started looking at things in terms of common denominators and how humans have been able to adapt so well, regardless of where they are on the planet. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh my God, I got it. The ability for humans to adapt is the core common denominator that we have. So humans are able to, we're able to survive, period. And that ability to survive boils down to fuel source, and that there's only two fuel sources that the human race has evolved to be able to utilize. Some people would argue there's a third one, right? The breath thing. And I won't go into that right now, but there's actually a lot of evidence there as well. But again, it's just a different way of living, and it's, in my mind, it's not the most optimal way to thrive, really. So carbohydrates and fat being the two macronutrients that humans have evolved to be able to survive on, and that the body's chemistry adapts a little differently depending on if you're eating carbs for the majority of what you're eating, or fat. And then I had another realization. So there's the carbs and the fat, but then in some of these places on Earth, we have access to both carbs and protein, fat from animals and stuff like that. And depending on which time of the year these people would find themselves in, the access to different fruits, vegetables, animals would differ. So we have this constant back and forth of an abundance of carbohydrates and then a lack of carbohydrates, and an abundance of animals that are seeking to survive, and humans being one of them as well. I had this thought that life consumes life, man. Like it's not about good or bad. It's about you either make it or you don't, man. And you, my friend, are the prime example of an animal that has managed to survive over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, whether you think about it or not, because you are literally your ancestors reincarnated. You are your ancestors' seed planted into a womb, perpetuating existence. And that goes all the way back to the first human, I guess you can say, first human, quote unquote. So that means that you also have all that information embedded within your cells. And so that was a huge one for me. I'm not going to lie, it took me a while to process that. But I think the biggest takeaway from that is that since we have the ability to adapt on both, that information is accessible to every single human. And not only that, but if you start to break down the biological processes that take place when you operate off of only carbohydrates or only fat and protein, you'll see that the body takes energy however it can, and that there are a few implications on both ends of that threshold, where if you eat only carbohydrates, or I shouldn't say that, if you eat largely carbohydrates, your body is going to function a certain way, and the way it detoxifies it's going to function a certain way. And when you remove those carbohydrates and you only eat fat and protein, your body will function a little differently. You're still creating energy through the Krebs cycle largely, and your body's still getting ATP, but the way it's getting it is different. And the ketosis aspect to this is so interesting, man. If you start looking into ketosis, I mean, you'll see what I'm about to tell you, but you go into ketosis, and ketosis opens the door for autophagy to happen. Now, that is a whole rabbit hole of its own. I'll go into it a little bit, but that has so many other implications as well. And just because you're in ketosis doesn't mean you're in autophagy, by the way. But there is the door that has been opened to do that. And whether you are consuming calories or not consuming calories will dictate whether or not you're going into ketosis and autophagy versus just ketosis, right? So I've always known this stuff, like ketosis, autophagy, apoptosis. These are buzzwords in the biohacking community, right? But it's always polarized. People are always either on one end of the spectrum or the other, and the people on both sides are like, this is the way. They sound like zealots. And I mean, the way I see it is it's got to be holistic, really, because it's not like human beings need to eat this way or eat that way, otherwise you're not going to do it, or you only need breath, or else everything else is evil. Like, those type of perspectives are too polarizing for me. I see myself as an individual who's been able to survive over thousands of years through the perpetuation of my bloodline, right? So I'm no different than they are, really, except I just have a different personality. If that's the case, then I need to be able to survive and adapt no matter what. And that really led me to this. And the revelations I've had while doing this are profound, man. I just got to say, like, just for starters, the brain fog thing, completely gone.
Wow.
The lethargy, the low blood pressure, the low blood sugar thing, not an issue anymore. Like, wow. Imagine that. Like, I was struggling so long to deal with this brain fog, which a lot of people don't admit until they're in a private setting that they have. So many people deal with this issue and they don't talk about it. But that is largely hypoglycemia, really. When you're not consuming enough blood sugar, I said that wrong. When you're not consuming enough glucose and your body doesn't have enough fuel to power the brain. So you have this brain fog, you have this lethargy, you have a lack of hydration. These are all contributing factors to people's issues, I guess you can say, but completely gone. Like, I don't deal with that. I used to have these like liver pains, and I realized that was from consuming too many fats and too many carbohydrates simultaneously. And there's an order through which you can actually consume carbohydrates so that it doesn't affect your insulin so much. And that's a way to do it also. People speak about that a lot. But one thing that I realized over all that is that carbohydrates are a drug, man. And a lot of people don't like to admit that they don't, man. That will fight you tooth and nail because they're like, oh, no, it's not a drug. It's like, nah, dude, like it really is one. And it's not bad. Like like I just said, I ate a pizza last night. I'm a human. I'm having an experience, and that's all it is. I'm not going to demonize things just because I want to. People tend to do that, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I get it however I get it. And it's my intention to survive no matter what. So it's not my intention to only eat fat and protein and to demonize the other thing. I see myself as a limitless person, and that I can do whatever I need to survive and to thrive while I'm doing it. But if I can't process fat efficiently, and if I can't go into ketosis efficiently, then I'm already limited by that. And if I can't get out of ketosis and eat carbohydrates and be fine, and then get back into ketosis a lot easier, then I'm also limited in that regard as well. So this is me having an experience where I'm, I guess you can say, like trying and failing, doing trial and error. And I'm having a lot more success than error, really. That's
cool. Awesome. I love all that. And there's so many areas that I want to get into, Sky. Like I made a bunch of notes here. Like I definitely want to talk about carb refeeding a little later, but I want to circle back to, like you mentioned, the 4 different ways to get into ketosis. You said no calorie, low calorie, no carb, or low carb. And when I think about it, like no calorie would be like fasting or intermittent fasting. Low calorie would be like caloric restriction, which like Walter Longo talks about, and a lot of other people. And then no carb, that's a little easier. And then low carb is probably the easiest of all those, which I think like everybody could do. And defining that's like, it's different for everybody, but like generally less than 50 grams a day of carbs or less than 30. I guess there's different levels of ketosis, right? Like there's mild or deep or.
Oh, right. Yeah, it is contingent on the individual. That's the first one. And it also depends on how much carbohydrates you eat in. If you've eaten too much calories over the last God knows when, and you still have to process all that before you can actually get to your baseline, your body's going to do that because that's just how it works. It's going to eliminate all the unnecessary things. So it's going to go into the adipose tissue. It's going to mobilize the fat. It's going to process the lipids in the liver to create the ketones, right? And this happens after your body starts fat adapting. So like your body's going to have to adjust, and this is what they call fat adapting or keto adapting. And when that happens, there's going to be a period where your body has to find that baseline, find the average. And then once it's there, it's a lot easier to be more flexible. But I found that when I first was doing this, I had to be at least 30 grams of carbs or lower. And that is the lowest barrier of entry for sure, the low carbohydrates. And what I usually tell people who ask me how they can get into it, I usually just say, cut carbs out of your breakfast. Cut it out of your breakfast, focus on hydration, get electrolytes into you, lime water, sea salt, potassium, magnesium, those things. And those are just bare minimum anyways. Like you should be taking those in regardless.
Mhm.
But the emphasis on that becomes a lot more apparent when you start to take carbohydrates out of the equation, because carbs actually help you retain a lot more water. So,
Yeah. Last night, I've been watching a lot of different lectures on ketosis, and last night, they were talking about. So I've been urinating at night a lot more, like getting up once at night, and I've never experienced that in my life. This like every single night, having to get up to pee, and this is taking ketone hypertonic before bed. This is not drinking right before bed. It's doing all. And the reason why is as your body's using up glycogen. I guess every gram of glycogen has about 3 to 4 grams of water with it, and that's in your liver, muscle, and fat. And so that's a lot of water that you're dumping, hence the electrolyte supplementation, right? To replenish that water loss.
Yeah, exactly. And that can change as you progress further down the road. Like, I don't wake up to pee anymore. That happened maybe like the first week, but I seem to have adapted quite quickly. I had a friend pass away last year, and I found myself quite depressed, and I put on a lot of body fat. I was eating a lot of ice cream, a lot of pizza, just finding comfort in that. And I think I put on about like 60 pounds. Put like 60 pounds on. Yeah, dude, you couldn't have told. I think I weighed in at the top of that, like over 200 pounds. It was like 208 or something like that. And as I started to shed all that weight, I shed it quick, man. I'm telling you, within a month, I had shed about 50 pounds. Yeah, dude, believe it or not, dude, just because I was out in Arizona with my family. I was hiking every day and getting the sun, just keto. It was like no carb. I think I was doing maybe like 5 grams of carbs a day or something. And I definitely hit the threshold real quick where I started getting the quote unquote keto flu or hypoglycemia stuff going on. And I plowed through it. I was like, man, whatever. I've done this before. I'm pretty used to fasting. But once I blew through that, I noticed that I shed a lot of water weight. It came off super fast. And then my requirement for water elevated quite quickly. And I noticed that I would get a fogginess in my brain if I didn't consume water with sea salt and lemon. And so I was doing a lot of those with carbonated water.
There's not a lot of sugar in lemon juice, because I've looked into that. I guess a lot of keto people recommend putting lemon in water. But.
So lemon has, I think it's like 3 grams of carbs per squeezed lemon. Let me look this up. I know that limes have substantially more. I think limes are like 11 grams of.
Wow.
Or it was 7. Here, let me see. I believe it was like 7 or 9.
Yeah.
Wait, lime? I must have typed it in wrong.
Yeah, there's so many like keto electrolyte products now. I know like Liquid IV, they sell at Costco and all these other stores sucks because it has cane sugar in it. And then I think LMNT is a popular one. And there's other brands. And it tends to be like magnesium, sodium, potassium, often citrate form with like stevia and or monk fruit.
Oh, nice.
I've been playing with those and feel really good.
Okay, so this is what it is. Lime has about 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrates in the juice from a squeezed one.
Okay.
And lemon has less. It's about a third of that. So I believe it's around like 1, it says like 1.2, but there's nuance there.
Right.
But yeah, so the limes have more carbs than the lemons. I don't see it too much of an issue though, because it's not like you're consuming a complex carbohydrate and your body has to release more insulin to deal with that. You don't really get much of an insulin response from lemon or lime. At least I haven't personally. So I went off a feeling. It felt good. I didn't
Right.
bother, just kept it moving.
Yeah, short into my keto journey, I tried a huge bowl of pasta, spaghetti and meatballs. And with my CGM, continuous glucose monitor, it was a crazy spike for a couple hours. It was a interesting experiment. I slept great. I was fine, but it was definitely like a 2 to 3 hour spike in my blood glucose.
Nice. You know what I've been doing lately is I've just been consuming my carbohydrates at night, which is great. This is going back to what you were saying, that you were waking up and peeing and stuff. Well, it was just logic for me. If carbs help me retain water, I'll just eat them at night. It's fine. So I don't eat like a ton of complex carbs, heavy foods at night. Yesterday I ate a pizza, but usually I'll consume, and it's different, but every day is different, I should say. But some days I'll do like carrots, other days I'll do like broccoli and stuff like that. I push the carbs, man. Like I definitely go over 50 grams of carbs in a day, and the next day I'm still in ketosis, but I feel great, man. This isn't something that I'm recommending to anyone to do. I'm not a doctor, right? So I can't like tell you this is what you should do, or this is what's going to work for you. But it is my anecdotal experience. I can show you the readings. I think I have the monitor right here. Like this morning, I woke up with a reading of 0.7, which is right above the lowest point for quote unquote nutritional ketosis. The way I see it is that there's ketones in my blood at any point, I'm in ketosis.
Have you heard the theory that you, even if you have ketones in your blood, you might not be utilizing them for fuel? Like Mark Sisson says that in a lot of his interviews. Just because you're, popping on a finger prick or even a breath or whatever, it doesn't mean you're in ketosis if you show blood ketones. Or
that is something that I can confirm for sure. But at the same time, it's not so cut and dry, man. Like you got to take into account what a person is consuming on a day to day. If they're consuming mainly carbohydrates, if that's what they're going to use for fuel, like it's not rocket science. You're just putting food in your body, and your body is making fuel from it. So your body will make ketones if you consume different types of foods, namely medium chain triglycerides. Like if you consume MCT oil, your liver is going to convert that into beta hydroxybutyrate. That's just what it is. That's one of the 3 main ketones that your body produces. By the way, for the people listening, you have beta hydroxybutyrate, you have acetoacetate, and then you have acetone, like regular acetone. Crazy, your body makes it. That's the sweet smell. That's the keto smell, right? The keto breath.
And a lot of the keto products now, like it used to be BHB, which I took like 5 years ago, and now it's 1,3 butanediol. They have them like hard seltzers. Yeah. And I definitely feel those. And then there's the whole argument that if you take exogenous ketones, then your body will not have to make them. But then I wonder, because that's kind of like the melatonin supplementation argument against melatonin, that if you take it, your body will stop producing it. But we know progesterone, melatonin, a lot of these things, it actually upregulates the body's own production. So I don't know if this exogenous ketone thing has been fleshed out fully yet.
There's not too much research done on this. There are some. You can find studies, but you have to read between the lines on some of these. On some of them, they're done on performance athletes, and they'll do the studies, but not with the intention to get the conclusion that you're looking for. It's just in the context there.
Right.
But I have noticed that with the exogenous ketone supplementation, there is a common thread where the body will, I wouldn't say it's down regulating, it's just not producing ketones because there's already ketones circulating. So what your body's going to do is going to use up those ketones in the brain, And then once there's no more, if you're fat adapted, if you're keto adapted, your body will take fat and then make more ketones. So your body mobilizes fat from the adipose tissue to the liver where the lipids are processed and then converted into ketones. So if your body is not mobilizing the fat from the adipose, then it just makes sense that your body is not producing ketones. I don't think it's a down regulation. It's just you already have circulating ketones. So that has its own benefit. I don't see it as a bad thing. If you want to have extra ketones for fuel and you don't want to have your body burning fat, then you can take that. And that's actually a really good, it's my personal favorite way of getting back into ketosis if I want to. And I've already been eating substantial amount of carbohydrates, which by the way, I don't have that issue anymore. But when I was first doing this months ago, I would fast to get into it, and then I would hit that roadblock we talked about. But then as I got more savvy to it, I was like, well, I can take exogenous ketone supplements, or I could just supplement with CA-MCT oil because the body's going to convert it into beta hydroxybutyrate anyways. And that had its own benefit, I guess you can say, because if I'm trying to get into ketosis and I know I'm going to hit the threshold where my brain's going to signal that there's low glucose levels in the brain, I'm going to hit that roadblock where I'm going to feel groggy or feel lethargic or feel like poo. But if there's ketones circulating, my brain will actually take those ketones and use them for fuel in the brain, and it'll completely curb or substantially curb the hypoglycemic signaling. So I won't have to deal with that. And then if I can do that while my body's processing a majority of the carbohydrates that I have in the queue to process before it's just fat and protein, that'll help me get into ketosis a lot quicker, because once there's no more carbohydrates and I do it long enough, my body would just use the fat for fuel. And that's speaking as if I'm your typical human being. For some people, especially like with diabetics and stuff, it doesn't work that way, right? There's always an exception, but the rules aren't made for exemptions.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I think it's a great tool. Like I've been using it because I've been, as we've spoken about off the air, I've been consuming a lot of white sugar the last couple of years, just in my raw goat milk, and that's probably the majority of the carb intake. But when I counted it up, especially breakfast, as you mentioned, I was shocked how many grams of carbs I was consuming for breakfast. It was probably close to 100 every morning for like 2 years. And I know a lot of people use like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, and even if it's somewhat inaccurate, I think it's useful, especially for the carbs, right, to monitor, because we have no idea. Like, it's insane how quickly it adds up.
Oh yeah, I mean, none of this is accurate to the T, but it gives you a good sense of what's going on. Even if it's not accurate, it's accurate to a specific degree, and it's accurate enough to where you can utilize this to your advantage. So you can see whether or not you're actually going overboard on certain things. For some people, it just helps to see it physically right in front of them.
Right. Yeah. I want to mention another thing. Last night, when I was researching ketosis, the analogy was made that the average person, even if they're on the thinner side, say like myself, there's a huge number of calories in storage versus the glycogen storage is about like, I think they said 1,700 calories roughly. Whereas once you tap into the adipose tissue as fuel, it's like over 100,000 calories. I think it was like 170,000 calories or something crazy.
Wow.
So they made the analogy that keto is like using a car battery and relying on your liver and muscle glycogen is like a AAA battery and running on that versus this huge battery. And I just feel that at a visceral level. It just, You could feel that.
Oh yeah. It feels completely different as well. This is something that you won't know until you actually find out. And if you don't find out, that you'll never know. A lot of people like to talk as if they have that visceral experience. And that's not how it works, man. Just because you read something on a book doesn't mean you actually understand it. You don't have that firsthand experience. So I highly encourage everyone listening that if you're curious, I mean, don't just jump and do it, but definitely keep in mind that you don't actually know what it feels like to run off of a car battery versus a AAA battery, so to speak. That's a good analogy. But they do feel different. The fats feel so much better. And the added bonus of being able to detox the amyloid plaque from the brain, it's not the only way to do it, but it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, you were telling me off the air that the sugar contributes a lot to that, right?
Yeah, white sugar, any processed food really, in terms of like wheat, like white sugar, bread. Oh, bread is the worst, man. It's funny because I ate a pizza yesterday, right? But it was an Italian style pizza.
That's why I feel like there's mitigation strategies, right? Like I really like gluten enzymes. I stopped selling them, but there's a million brands that sell gluten digesting enzymes. DPP4, I can't remember the name. And yeah, I like to do things. If I'm drinking red wine, I take a couple things. If I'm eating bread, I mean, I always take digestive enzymes, and I feel like it helps a lot.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing to touch on real quick. So we have our gut microbiome, and it's such a complex. It's such a complex system. There's so many things going on in your gut and your skin. You know, the microbiome isn't just inside your stomach; it's on your skin. It's in your mouth. There's a lot going on there. But digesting food is super nuanced as well, right? Because there are so many contributing factors to a efficient digestive system, and it's contingent upon what foods you consume. And we can go on for days with that one, but the biggest things to take into account are like your prebiotics, your probiotics, the bacteria in your gut, right? And then you have things like butyrate, you have acetate. There's another one. Are those the two main ones that I want to touch on? Yeah, let's just talk about those, because I know a lot of people who start to dig into this stuff, especially with the whole liver thing, because it's a huge thing. It's a huge deal. I would say the liver is probably the biggest deal out of anything. And it's so fascinating too, because the liver can regenerate itself. Like you could remove a large majority of the liver and it'll regenerate. Super fascinating. But the liver and bile production, super important. I won't touch on that too much, but as you know, the liver has to process the fat. It releases bile, and I believe it's the gallbladder as well that helps bile production. So this organ specifically also deals with butyrate, and I believe it's butyrate, right? Yeah. So when you eat resistant starch, when you consume like day-old rice and stuff like that, you get butyrate as a bonus along with this. And that's something that a lot of Asian cultures tap in on, because their fried rice is usually day-old rice that will then be refried, or fried, I should say, into fried rice and stuff. So you get this food that has butyrate as well. I don't know if cooking it denatures that, so to speak, but I know people consume day-old rice all the time, and there's butyrate there, and butyrate helps your body digest food. It's just one of those things. But there's a lot of concern with people considering going keto, that they are unsure about how their body is going to manage the lack of butyrate, because the only food on a keto diet really that has a substantial amount of butyrate is like butter. But even then, it's not a substantial amount compared to if you're consuming a high carbohydrate diet. So I started looking into it, and it turns out if you can think about it, one of the ketones I mentioned is beta hydroxybutyrate, right? So butyrate isn't a name; it's literally a type of butyrate, and your body makes it endogenously. So this is something interesting that I was like, why are these people so scared of going keto and then not taking into account that your body makes its own butyrate and it makes its own acetate. Acetate is another one that people deal with when they're eating carbohydrates and stuff like that. It helps them digest food. So people will take like a spoonful of ACV before they eat or something because that has acetate in it. Acetate is vinegar, acetic acid. So your body will produce its own acetate as well in the form of acetoacetate. And I was thinking about that a lot. I started looking into the studies, and sure enough, it turns out that acetoacetate is a lot more potent than acetate, and that your body will make a different type of butyrate. Is it called isobutyrate? I think it's called isobutyrate. Let me look this up real quick.
Recently I found out due to my genetics, I have a 1.7 higher risk, 1.7 times higher risk for gallstones and bile duct cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of people have no thyroid, they have their thyroid taken out and their gallbladder taken out. I know that's very common, especially the gallbladder one. But if you're doing a low fat or no fat, that's not good for your gallbladder health. Because every time you eat fat, your gallbladder has to release bile. Right. And that's it's like use it or lose it, is my understanding. And it kind of helps to keep that clear, especially the ducts. So,
interesting. Well, yeah, that just going back to the point that everyone is different. You got to know what you're dealing with before you go into this stuff. But that's like the best ammunition you can arm yourself with before going into these type of drastic lifestyle shifts. Really. So it is isobutyrate. Your body will actually make its own type of butyrate that's a lot more potent than regular butyrate. So, and it uses a lot less of it to accomplish the same tasks. Something I found firsthand when I started implementing zero carbohydrate, and I mean like close to zero, really. And then I found that my digestion got way better than it had ever been. It's crazy. And no runs, like I got no diarrhea, I got no constipation. My bowel movements decreased slightly. I used to go like 3-4 times a day, started going like 2 times a day if I'm eating high meat and almost like no fiber, really, which is another thing we can touch on. I found that I was going like once, twice a day, in the morning and later in the day, and super smooth like ice cream.
Wow.
TMI, right? But I'm just telling you, man, it's like, you wouldn't believe it until you do it.
I'm glad you brought up fiber, because that's one thing. So I'm still getting through Dr. Mercola's book, Fat for Fuel, and it's a lot of great info in there. And he's a huge proponent of fiber. He recommends like 70 grams a day. And since I'm pretty much eating no fruit right now on this experiment at all, I find it kind of difficult to get in fiber. I mean, I definitely up my vegetables. I'm eating a ton more vegetables every day. But I've been supplementing with different fiber products, and and I've been feeling great. Like I find if I undereat fiber, especially if I'm doing C8 MCT oil, like you mentioned MCT, I do get the runs and I do get loose stools. But if I have that soluble and insoluble fiber coming in, which they each have different effects, I feel a lot more balanced and just full body functions better if I keep up with my fiber every day.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good thing to touch on. There's a whole school of thought that you need fiber. Fiber is not essential, by the way. So like let's just address the elephant in the room. So not only is fiber not essential, but carbohydrates are not essential either. That's just fact. It's not my opinion. This is not only is visceral knowledge to me, but this is explicitly stated in so many studies. Carbohydrates are the only non-essential macronutrient. It is what it is. You can find out for yourself or not. I mean, my life is unaffected, right? But fiber is also not essential either. And I've proven that through my own life as well. I consume close to no fiber at all. And I've done this for months, really. And at first it was weird, but then I realized that there are other things that need to be addressed, like hydration. There are a lot of other factors with like the microbiome that you can play with. But at the end of the day, your body doesn't need the fiber. Fiber is great. There's benefits to that, but it comes with a dark downside. If you're consuming fiber from certain vegetables, and vegetables have a lot of heavy metals in them, and it's not on the surface. There's another school of thought there that, if I just soak my vegetables in vinegar, or if I put it in Kangen water, that it's gonna fix it. You can't be that ignorant to reality, man. You have to do your research. And sure enough, man, the heavy metals are deposited in the vegetable. It's not just on the surface. So you can wash them all you want, but you're still intaking the heavy metals that are inside the vegetable itself. So,
and most people are probably not taking Shilajit every day, and they're not sleeping on a Magnetico to get magnetochylation. They're not keeping up with it. So that's probably where the problem lies there.
Oh yeah, there's a whole lot of mitigation strategies you can implement to do that. And chelation therapy is great. I love Shilajit for that reason. You get the humic fulvic acid and mineral complex as well. But you can also do other things. This is a big reason why I focus so much on methylation these days, because methylation helps you expel arsenic. So arsenic is like one of the big devils in this reality that not a lot of people pay attention to. There's arsenic in so many things, and it's cancerous, man. Stuff is bad. And if you don't methylate properly, if you're inflamed, your body is not it's not utilizing folate efficiently. And then you also have the polymorphisms as well with the MTHFR, and that can also play a part in it as well. So if you don't methylate properly, you don't methylate arsenic and expel arsenic. That is one of the ways your body gets rid of arsenic. So when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, man, I gotta up my game. So I'm a huge proponent of B complex, thiamine. We talked about
Elliot. So you introduced me to Elliot Overton. I don't have any MTHFR gene mutations, and I do better on the non-methylated forms of B vitamins. Do you have the MTHFR mutation?
So I actually have my gene analysis coming in like 2 weeks or something. Okay. So I'll let you know. This is a huge deal for me. As I started diving into more and more of this stuff, I realized that genetics are huge, right? So none of this is to downplay the importance of knowing how your genetics will spell out how you can and should live optimally. But it's something definitely that I would recommend taking into account regardless. I do good on both methylated and non-methylated, and that's also a huge sign that my body, my genes are in harmony with that. So I probably don't have that polymorphism. I'll see if I do, and I'll let you know. But I do really good on methylated. I love methylated, actually. I feel great off that. But with non-methylated, I still feel just as good. I like to take the non-methylated because I get a lot of those nutrients, the wide array of B complex, and the B complex I take is from Elliot Overton, and I love his B complex. It's great. I think it has acetylcholine in there as well, and a bunch of other cool stuff that just feels really good on my brain. So I want to provide those nutrients that my body will use during methylation anyways, because it's going to help get the arsenic out and just support my own natural methylation process. But I play with both.
And supplementation in general, do you think helps the transition into ketosis? Like I know you sell methylene blue, and that's a huge one for energy production and just systemic function, and the B complex, and you have ascorbic acid, and you can kind of support your system as it's transitioning. Because I've been having a rough time going from white sugar to this. It's shaking up my immune system. I feel like I've had COVID again, stir up and all this stuff. It's like wild.
Yeah, that's definitely not unheard of. People have a wide array of different experiences with it. They call it the keto flu, right? Mm-hmm. But the methylene blue is great. I love it. Adds extra electrons to the transport chain. It feels really good. It also supports autophagy, mitophagy. Man, there's so many things that does. It's been such a huge hack for me. So it's why I'm such a big proponent for it, because it's helped me personally with short-term, long-term memory as well. Mm-hmm. I go weeks without taking it sometimes just to see how I feel.
Because it builds up in the mitochondria, I've heard. So, because there's some companies like saying, be careful, you want to low dose it 4 to 16 milligrams a day, absolute max, because you can OD and get negative health effects. And from what I've heard, I mean, I've taken 80 milligrams at once before, over 100 milligrams in a day. But I don't do 200. That. Wow.
Yeah, man.
But it does build up, and over time, but your body will use it up, right, in the mitochondria. So it's hard to get toxic in it unless you're taking it 24/7, 365 days a year, right?
Right. Well, just like with anything else, you want to cycle these things. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in existence aside from probably the essentials that you need to be taking all the time. Mm-hmm. And this is something that you can just see it as a tool to help enhance the experience. I take it here and there, and it's so good to me. I got to say the short to long term conversion benefit that I've gotten from the methylene blue is by far one of the best things that I've ever received from any type of nootropic thing that I've worked with, and that's saying a lot. It's also one of the main reasons why I started getting really deep into autophagy and researching what I could do naturally. And that's ultimately what led me into going towards ketosis, because so many of the benefits that I get from ketosis are also benefits that I get from methylene blue. So there's a lot there.
I definitely want to go into autophagy next. Cool. But first, I had a question that came up earlier, and this is kind of like a Jack Cruz thing. And I've heard it over the years that this theory that increased sunlight, specifically UV wavelength, allows for more carbohydrate intake, meaning that your body can process the carbohydrates without causing any bodily harm at all. And that kind of goes along with, fruit grows year round around the equator, versus where I'm at here in North Idaho. I'm looking out the window. There's snow as far as I can see. I'm not going to see any carbohydrates in my environment for another, 3-4 months.
Right.
And so when I was consuming a lot of even honey, maple syrup, wild rice, which you would say is natural carbohydrates out here, I felt like that was still too much. And when I started on cod liver oil, this mega concentrated fat source, I felt like my cold tolerance went through the roof. It gets super cold up here. I'm almost at Canada, and just life. I feel more in sync with my environment, like you were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah.
Eating higher fat in this cold climate. It's night and day.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, don't you find cod around this this region? So you'll find a lot of fish in this area. You'll find a lot of like venison. So there's a lot of elk around here, more deer really. So you like deer, elk.
Yeah, because you're in the same neck of the woods for people that don't know, like Pacific Northwest, right?
Oh yeah. I'm up here. I'm I think like 10 minutes away from Washington, and then maybe like 5 hours away from Canada. So it's pretty cold. Like this morning, it was completely frozen outside. I think it was like 27 degrees or something. So it's pretty cold. But if you think about it, what animals are around? If you're consuming cod liver oil, imagine you were eating nose to tail fish, animals that you can find like wild game and stuff like that. It would make sense that actually helps you cold adapt a lot better, because those animals are surviving in that region. And it's similar to plants as well, where you if you consume plants that are really hardy in nature and that they are able to survive the cold, you'll find that some of these plants like firs and cedar, they have a lot of essential oils that they develop as a defense mechanism to help them survive in the cold environments. It's a response to the environment, the stimulus. So these terpene profiles, these lipids, are created by the trees as a response to the environment. So
I really miss consuming pine and spruce resin. Dr. Kassinger, before he passed, he had his Purely Wild, and he mixed it with like black seed oil and a bunch of other stuff. But I want to start consuming those resins again consistently, because I felt a huge difference.
I highly recommend it. I do it as well. I have some spagyrics that I make. I've made spagyrics out of just about every tree around me. Cool. So I have like spagyrics. And for those who don't know, spagyrics are plant alchemy, I guess you can say, in the simplest form. It's something that I do quite often. It's my main, I don't know if you would call it a job. It's just like my life's work at this point. I make spagyrics. But consuming those oils has a great effect on my immune system, especially pine needle. Oh my God, that stuff is great. You can just put pine needles in a steaming cup of water and get benefits from it that way.
I first heard COVID, it was like vitamins. It's like a natural source or a wild source of ascorbic acid, right? But also all these other compounds that help your immune system.
Oh yeah, totally. And something that I noticed is that there's a lot of quinones in some of the late fruits that you can get in the winter, like late fall, winter. Hawthorn is great. It has I believe it's quinones, or is it quinines? You know, those two are similar classifications. Yeah. Well, these compounds are extremely beneficial to consume if you're dealing with like COVID, or if you're dealing with other stuff, respiratory infections and things like that. There's a common thread there. That's why black seed oil is so great as well, because the thymoquinone in it is so beneficial. I mean, that's just one benefit of that. Black seed oil is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So autophagy, I wanted to jump into that because as I've been studying human physiology, human health, I thought it was like a lot of switches, like either on or off. But what I'm realizing, just like ketosis, it's not necessarily like that. It's like levels of like we're always performing autophagy, is my understanding. I might be wrong, but when we intermittent fast or water fast, or caloric restrict, or like you said, those 4 different ways of getting into ketosis, those are like different levels of autophagy. Like I've dialed in on the lipofuscin aspect of autophagy inhibition, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff that inhibits it. I'd imagine consuming carbohydrates is one.
Consuming calories.
Okay. Yeah. But it's like the garbage recycling part of our cells, right? Taking the garbage out of our cells.
What I found with autophagy is that, like you said, there is a lot of context to consider. And I'm only scratching the surface on some of this stuff. But from what I have seen and what I have experienced, it's any substantial amount of protein or carbohydrate that will kick you out of autophagy. And you can consume lipids in small amounts, but in greater amounts than carbohydrate and protein, and still stay in autophagy. Now, what kind? I guess that does also play a part, right? But I've noticed that I can do like black coffee with MCT oil, and I'm fully autophagy. Once you feel it,
how do you know that? Oh, so to give it, okay. So people will challenge that, say, how do you know? So.
Oh, believe me, man. Like, I know when I'm in autophagy, I get that feeling in my stomach. I get the feeling in my brain. This is why I'm such a huge proponent of getting to know what your body does and how that feels. Get to know your body. Start associating the biological processes with the feeling. Because what happens is, like, when you go into ketosis, there's a feeling that happens. You'll know it's unmistakable. It's this clear enlightenment. Ketosis is literally a state of enlightenment. It's a metabolic state of enlightenment where you're literally lightening the load on your whole body and on your brain. Your body is going and breaking all the stuff down, especially you get into autophagy. Just stop eating for like 2 days. I mean, I'm not telling you to do that, right? But if you did that, you would see that your body is going to go into all the stores. It's going to deplete glycogen. It's going to deplete whatever else you've got sitting in the stomach. And then your body starts going into autophagy. It starts recycling the cells. Autophagy means self-eating, right? So it goes into the cells, your body, and then it starts breaking down damaged cells and recycling parts of different proteins and even viruses. It breaks down viruses, and it recycles parts of viruses too, and uses these parts to build new cells that are fully functioning and not damaged. Something so fascinating, but there's a feeling associated with it. And it's unmistakable. Once you get to that point, if you go far enough, you'll get that feeling in the stomach, push past the feeling in the stomach, and then all of a sudden it's like, enlightenment, man.
Have you experimented with not only EAAs, essential amino acids, but the one that's patented? It's the master amino pattern, because I was first introduced to that through Purium, that multi-level marketing company, and they have like the 10-day anabolic fast, which is, a green shake like 3 times a day with these tablets, which you can buy now from a couple companies, both as compressed tablets or as powder. But what's unique is Dr. Minkoff, who kind of has been the biggest proponent of it. He has, it's built into his marketing that, if you're not consuming carbohydrates, your body will use amino acids to produce glucose via gluconeogenesis, but that actually will only be 1% of the intake of these aminos due to the nature of their ratio and how it was invented. So it's like a cheat, but I wonder if it is. I mean, there's no like free lunch in life. With that stuff. So it's interesting, but it's called net nitrogen utilization, and it's 99%. Whereas, eggs, breast milk is 48%. So
that's impressive. I'd love to see, I'm not too versed in that, so I would definitely have to look into it, but it sounds great. I mean, if it's patented and they have literature supporting it, I'm sure that's great.
No one company utilizes it, but it's like different companies. Yeah.
Well, so your body will, like you said, create its own sugar. It'll take the glycerol, backbone of the amino acids, and it'll convert it into it's the breakdown product of glucose, right? Or is it the breakdown product of pyruvate?
I thought that was fat, but I know the body can use
Oh, hold on. Let me pull up the Krebs cycle.
Protein's like the least efficient way for your body to make glucose.
Oh, then that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
So that makes sense why it would be 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's interesting because you have all these different theories on protein consumption. Like I know Mercola really emphasizes moderate protein, and then you have like the Sean Bakers, the carnivore people, that says high protein's not an issue when it comes from food and not protein powders. I've heard Sean say that in interviews before. I'm not a fan of the carnivore diet. I think that's way too much protein. I think you can overdo protein out of balance. I think it's an important macronutrient, but
yeah. So that's something interesting we could talk about real quick.
Yeah.
So the protein thing, I used to be a lot more on the same school of thought where I would limit high protein. But come to find out, you know, if you do more like a Mediterranean style ketogenic diet where you're still taking in some of these like olive oil and some of these plants and like higher protein and a little bit more moderate fat. I used to be a lot more higher fat, which by the way is lovely for digestion. If you can process that, there's so much nuance. You gotta learn how you can personally work through that. But if you look at that type of diet where it's, like I said, a little bit higher protein than a traditional keto diet, it seems to work pretty good. You know, it's not bad per se. And I guess you can see where a lot of that stuff that the carnivore people talk about comes into play, where they swear up and down that this is the way to do it. I don't think it's the one way to do it. I think it's just going back to what we were talking about before, where the body is highly adaptable. You can utilize so many different ways, but it's also extremely Taoist in nature, where a way is a way. You're just finding a way to do it, and that's just what it is. Polarizing people, I think it's ignorant.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is like one gram of protein per kilogram of body weight, and then some other people say it should be 1.5 or minimum 2 grams of protein per kilogram.
Well, I've seen some literature that says otherwise. So this goes back to the whole Mediterranean style thing where I was telling you about, where I have the study somewhere on my bookmarks, but I'll have to send it to you. So essentially this study found that there was almost no distinction in muscle synthesis when they looked at a person consuming like 0.6 grams of protein per body weight compared to like 1.5 or something. And that they were, the study for more context was conducted on you had your control group, and then you had the study group where there were performance athletes that were given a ketogenic diet, and they had a few of them with lower protein intake and others with higher protein intake, and then they had the control group also doing higher and lower protein. And what they found is that not only did the keto group build more muscle than the control group, but they also found that there was no noticeable distinction between the lower and higher protein intake. Essentially saying that not only did the athletes build more muscle on keto, but it didn't matter whether they consumed slightly below the quote unquote optimal protein RDA and a slightly higher protein RDA. It's pretty interesting. It blows a hole in a lot of these theories or statements that I've come to accept as truth.
Right. Have you dived into the idea that muscle is a superior storage site of glycogen versus fat, like adipose? Because I'm not sold on that. A lot of the like Gabriel Lyon and Lyons and a lot of these bodybuilder educators, they'll say muscle is king and it's way better than adipose. I don't know. I just got a little scale that measures body fat percentage, that you stand on barefoot. And I'm a super thin guy. I can't see my abs like you could like 4 years ago when I was intermittent fasting a lot, but I still have pretty good amount of body fat. And, even a thin person, that's a huge battery pack that you're just carrying around, even if you don't, lift weights a ton.
Well, something interesting to think about is that when people go into ketosis, or just in general, muscle is a lot more taxing on the system than fat. Your body uses more energy to maintain muscle, so it tends to go to muscle first as a source for energy. Especially when you get into a catabolic state, your body will tend to go to that first. I haven't seen too much literature on whether or not it's a superior store for carbohydrates, although I don't doubt it, right? But at the same time, yeah, it is a lot more taxing on the body to maintain muscles. But there is some cool literature that I've seen that showed that your body won't even break down muscle if you're in a ketogenic state, as long as you just go on walks, do high intensity interval training, stuff like that.
It's a protein sparing effect, right? When you're in ketosis.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, your body won't. I've seen that a lot of people are under the impression that if you go into ketosis, since it can be catabolic at some points, that it will break down your muscle, and that's not true at all. There's actually lots of studies that I've seen that show the opposite. That not only can you spare all your muscle, but you can build more muscle on a ketogenic diet than you could on just carbohydrates, because you don't have to deal with the water weight. Your body is also you're consuming a lot of protein typically, and you just take it in, and your body knows what to do with it. You're not having to deal with that extra macronutrient that can seemingly get in the way, just from my perspective.
Yeah, and you mentioned carb refeeding earlier, and you mentioned the pizza, and so that's another debate that I see. I mean, there's so many debates in this area. That's why it's kind of interesting. A lot of the, especially carnivore people will say, not only are carbs not essential, like you said, but you never ever have to carb refeed in your life. And
well, that's not being realistic, right? I mean,
right.
This is something that we have as a how should I say it? This is a luxury we have as human beings, that we have grocery stores, we have department stores, grocery stores, liquor stores. Dude, everywhere you look, you can get carbohydrates. Everywhere you look, you can get a freaking sandwich. You can get jerky. We have access to so many things, and that's just a luxury. It's not something that is normal. Even farming is not normal. If you think about it, farming is technology. Humans invented farming, or maybe we got it from the aliens, who knows? But the fact is that it's not a natural process. Like the department stores, the access to all this food, monocropping, all that stuff, that's not normal. It's not supposed to be largely abundant like that. So for a carnivore to say, oh, eat like all this freaking meat, eat all this liver, like consume nothing but liver and testicles and muscle meats and stuff like that. I think it's highly polarized, and it's not taking into account cycles that happen naturally, where if you didn't have access to all these luxuries, you would probably have a harder time maintaining one type of diet nonstop. And there's people who can do it. I know people personally. My dad's a hunter. You can hunt a few animals a year, and if you have means to store it, you can live off of meat all year round. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it is taken away from the context of human beings living in accordance with nature, where if you had to hunt for food, if you had to hunt and gather, fast, feast, hunt, those are cycles. You sometimes you have successful hunting, sometimes you have a failed hunt and you have to fast forcefully. Other times you might have some crops that you raised, unless you're like a master farmer or something like that. I don't think you would have that many carbohydrates on cue all year round, and the same goes the other way around. It's normal to be able to think about it in terms of access to all three macronutrients, and sometimes I eat carbs, sometimes I don't eat carbs. It's just what it is, bro. It's not like this formulated thing that I'm going off of.
Yeah. When I did the self-decode, so that you can pay to have like a genetics consultation, and I paid for like a bundle. Mm-hmm. And the one I had, the doctor said that I have farmer genetics. So I guess, and I've asked some of my genetic, Tyler Pansner, my friend that's into genetics, about this, and said, yeah, it's true. There's hunter genetics and farmer genetics. And I wonder what that means. I haven't delved into what farmer genetics means for me. But I can say I do feel a lot better consuming a ton of vegetables. And I mean, broccoli, green beans, beets, just those sort of Brussels sprouts, different lettuce. I feel great on that. So I wonder if that's the individuality part, especially like the fiber aspect.
Yeah, it can be. If you take into account that over a couple hundred years ago, we didn't have to deal with chemtrails and all this other BS that they're putting in the food supply, and the poisons that we're dealing with everywhere in the tap water, and it's like you can't even touch a receipt without there being something bad going on right there. But it's also extremely important to point this out, because I don't want people to think that polarizing things is okay, because realistically there's so much context you need to take into account that this can be mind-boggling for so many people. But methylation requires folate, and folate for the most part is found in leafy green vegetables and plants, really. You can get it in liver if you eat nose-to-tail. This is why so many people are proponents for the carnivore thing. You can consume nose-to-tail, and you can get just about everything that you need just from animals. Realistically, you don't need to eat plants ever. But and yeah, there's like folate in the liver. So if you eat liver maybe like 2 times, 3 times a week, depends on the person, right? You could get your folate requirement, and it gets stored. Not the best, right? Because it is a water soluble compound, but those fuel sources for those folate sources, you can find them all around nature. So I think that since methylation is such a huge factor in longevity, and that folate is a critical component of methylation, it makes sense that humans evolved eating plants and animals, that you would have a requirement to eat some folate here and there. And how you get it varies. It could be that your ancestors, they were farmers, and that they got most of their folate from leafy greens.
Right. Yeah, I've eaten testicles outside of a supplement once, and Rocky Mountain oysters, and I would prefer not to eat, that going forward if I have the choice. If it's between vegetables and testicles, I would personally go for vegetables. But
I like how they rhyme.
I want to ask kind of a basic question for you, Sky, and this is probably what everyone's wondering. I just shot a what I eat in a day video. It's cliche, but I guess it's one of the most important things because everyone has to eat. And so probably a lot of people are wondering, what's your average day look like? You wake up, what do you do?
So that depends on the day, because I like to experiment. I like to do different things, and I like to simulate, so to speak, at a micro level, what cycle and fluctuation would be if I didn't have access to the same thing all the time. So some days I start off and I get a few eggs, maybe like 2 or 3, and I crack them open and I kind of shimmy the egg while it's in a half of an eggshell, and I get the whites out of there. And then I just take 3 raw egg yolks to the dome and just down the hatch. And I feel amazing off that, by the way. That's like my favorite breakfast. I'll do 3 raw egg yolks, and sometimes I do a cup of heavy cream. Yeah, a cup of heavy cream. You heard that right. That's probably the most constant thing I do every morning. I do a cup of heavy cream, and I do it because it's so calorie dense. It's got a lot of fat. But some days I like mix that with coffee. I do like coffee, L-theanine, heavy cream, butter. I just like mix it in with a NutriBullet or whatever, and then I just drink it. Other days I'll cook like 2 eggs. The yolks are not as filling as the total egg, so you can imagine why I do like 3. And the reason why I take them raw in that sense is the whites are harder to digest if they're not cooked. And I think there's some complications that can happen over the course of maybe like a month or even longer. And it also depends on the person, again, that can result from consuming egg whites uncooked. And I'm not scared of salmonella or E. coli or any of that stuff. Like, you got to microdose your environment, bro. If you get sick, that's how your body develops an immune response, a beefy immune system, I should say. So I do that. And then in the morning, I either take the eggs raw or I cook them with some bacon. Sometimes I do, I'm trying to think if I add something to that. It's pretty straightforward. Sometimes just, hot sauce. So I'll do the eggs, bacon, cooked, right? And then hot sauce.
You cook them in ghee or coconut oil or anything?
Or? Sometimes I don't cook them. I like scramble them just with a little bit of water. Other times I cook them in butter. I'm not a fan of ghee, really. I know, right? The smell is just not it, man. Like, I go off of smell. That's how I connect with my world. I'm big on butter. The smell of butter at a low temp is great. The smell of ghee at low temp, not the same, man. And I just don't vibe with it. But I will do it raw. I love eating ghee just raw like that, spoonfuls of it. But cooking with butter, sometimes I do tallow. Or I don't prefer this, man. But sometimes I'll cook the bacon first, and I'll let some of the bacon fat stay on the pan, and then I'll fry my eggs in that. Just a pinch of sea salt and stuff like that. That's cool. I noticed my body isn't the biggest fan of pork fat like that. It's fine if it's in the bacon, but like consuming that much pork fat when I'm already consuming a lot of like heavy cream and butter in the coffee, I feel like that's just like sometimes going overboard. So I will cook the eggs first and then I'll add the bacon. But then lunch, I'll snack on some jerky. have tea. I like doing a lot of lime water. Sometimes I do carbonated water. My lunches sometimes tend to be the biggest meal of the day. I find that my body digests, I should say, it digests just about everything way better around high noon. My digestive fire is more primed. So sometimes I'll have a light meal for breakfast, and then I'll do like half a pound of steak for lunch. And my lunch, I'll take it anywhere from like high noon to maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And then for dinner, I try to keep it lighter. Sometimes it's just another half pound of meat, but it varies. I do chicken, I do turkey. I like to switch it up. I feel like the whole monotonous thing is what would get me more than anything. So I like to cook different things. I'm big into alchemy, traditional laboratory alchemy, and I like to tinker with things, and food is an extension of that. So I play with different Mexican recipes and just about anything I could get my hands on. I keep it fresh, man.
Yeah, you posted one recently that looked really good.
Oh, the chiles rellenos. Yeah. Those are just poblano peppers.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing any tuna or salmon? Or?
Oh, yeah. I knew I was missing something. So I do like mussels, oysters. So I do mussels, oysters, shellfish. I tend to stay away from the bigger fish like tuna. I'll do like sardines, if anything. Sardines, mackerels, stuff like that. But the reason for that is because of the mercury and heavy metal content in the bigger fish. They tend to accumulate way more heavy metals over their lifespan. So I like to stay away from that and just go for the smaller fish and the shellfish.
That's an interesting one because I've been delving into that. Eric Berg, kind of funny to reference, but that YouTube doctor that's, you search keto, it's like 50% of the videos are Dr. Berg on there, or doctor, chiropractor, whatever you want. But he thinks that's kind of overblown. The mercury thing, that it's only an issue mainly with like, was it whalefish, swordfish, and there's one other one where the mercury is super high. I have interviewed like Tim, the biohacker. He said he was eating sushi every day, and he did test and he did develop mercury toxicity. But I know there's
its source.
There's selenium, which is a mercury detoxifier that's present in fish. And there's also like Safe Catch, which even Costco sells now, which I love, which they mercury test every tuna before they put it in the can.
I got to try that out. I'm not opposed to it. I just try to limit it, and it's not for that reason. The main reason, actually, I like to limit just fish consumption in general, and I lean more towards shellfish, is because the position of the DHA in most fish is a SN1 and SN3 position DHA. And I find that that's not as bioavailable as SN2 position DHA, which is usually in shellfish. And that's a big thing I don't see a lot of people talk about. I personally just feel better in general, just off of shellfish. Oysters are awesome. They're loaded with so many. They're so good. If you could get past the texture thing, I like to eat them raw with a little bit of lemon.
It helps to get the small to medium too. I've gone to restaurants where it's like the size of your palm, and it's hard. I mean, that's hard to eat at once. You have to like cut it in half or something.
Not me, man. Right here in the Pacific Northwest, the oysters are huge. So, and like you might guess just from me telling you the egg yolk thing, but I can swallow egg yolks no problem. I don't gag or anything.
I like those, yeah.
So the same thing with the oysters. I just slurp them. They go down the hash pretty easily. You just got to have a relaxed state and not like constrict your esophagus so much.
Yeah, that the DHA position is interesting because I think if people are aware of my past, I used to sell Schizochytrium microalgae oil, which is now the most popular vegan DHA source. And
that's an SN1 position, I believe.
Right. And Jack used to bash me for that for years. And even after I stopped selling it, it was hilarious. But Jack Cruz, he often says that seafood, all of it is in the SN2 position. What did you find? Like, I know
it's just the ratios.
Oh, the ratios of them. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the ratios.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, it's all there, but I just find I do way better off the shellfish. It's just my own personal experience. The fish is cool too, but there is a clear-cut difference in my cognition when I consume shellfish versus just like huge fish like tuna.
Interesting. Yeah, you've probably seen me the last couple of years go down the whole omega-3 rabbit hole, and I like Chris Masterjohn's article on them. Was it Nutritious but Perilous, something like that? He wrote years ago about, EFAs, essential fatty acids, and I personally feel better with a higher omega-3 intake, and my self-decode, my genetics actually reflect that. I have a higher requirement for omega-3s and retinol, vitamin A. Oh, yeah. Hence why I feel like I'm on crack when I take cod liver oil. I mean, my brain's just firing on every cylinder.
You probably have a higher requirement for retinol in general. Some people tend to get like liver toxicity with the high A, or what is it, like cholestasis or whatever. But I mean, it just goes to show everybody is a little different. I think it's something fascinating as far as how I've been able to work with the stuff. The DHA stuff is great. ALA is an interesting thing to take into account because it's really good for AMPK. AMPK is. Did we touch on this? No, we didn't. So AMPK is something that I love. It's one of the biggest things for me as far as longevity goes. And for those who don't know, AMPK stands for activated or AMP activated protein kinase. AMPK is AMP activated adenosine monophosphate kinase. It's a complex of enzymes, and you find them in just about all parts of the body, different organs. It's in muscles. It's in your tissue. It's in so many parts of the body, and there's a lot to talk about with that. I feel like we could do a whole episode on AMPK alone, but AMPK is it's one of two things that it's well known for people who are into biohacking and bodybuilding and stuff like that, because it's catabolic, whereas it's one end of a threshold for a lot of people, where you have on one end AMPK and the other end you have mTOR, and mTOR is a mammalian target of rapamycin, right? So mTOR deals with building muscle. Too much mTOR activation can be bad for longevity, and then AMPK is breaking things down, burning fat. It promotes the transport of glucose. While your AMPK pathway is active, your body won't store fat. But that's a pretty general way of putting it, because AMPK is found in all parts of the body for the most part, and depending on where it's active is where you'll get those benefits. So this is why working out is so cool, because or like even going on a rebounder afterwards as well, to get all your body engaged. When you're on a rebounder, you rebound, and the G-force engages all your organs, your connective tissue, your muscles, everything, fat. So it's good for burning fat. It's a whole body workout, really. But one of the added benefits of doing it after you go on a run or whatever is that AMPK gets activated throughout the whole body. So one thing that's interesting to note is that AMPK and mTOR are like a balance of scales, and that when AMPK is active in one area, mTOR shuts down there. And when mTOR is active, AMPK shuts down. And for AMPK to be active, AMPK essentially is AMP, adenosine monophosphate. And as you can probably guess, it is the step down the ladder, or the step up the ladder, I should say, from ATP. So when your body utilizes ATP, adenosine triphosphate, for energy, it breaks it down into adenosine monophosphate. And when you have enough adenosine monophosphate in the body, you have what's known as AMPK activation, which is the pathways for AMP illuminate, so to speak. And then your body stops building muscle and it utilizes fat for energy, stops storing fat while this is active, promotes the utilization of glucose. It has some other benefits. It stimulates the production of SIRT1. What's the other thing? It inhibits the signaling of nuclear factor kappa B pathways. So the NF-κB pathway, that's a pro-inflammatory pathway, by the way. So in English, I guess, AMPK reduces chronic inflammation. It increases your ability to utilize glucose, burn fat, all those good things. So it's great for longevity, actually. And there's lots of studies on this that show that activating AMPK has huge implications in extending lifespan, and that people who engage the AMPK pathway more often will actually live longer. And mTOR is not necessarily bad either, because you use your body activates mTOR and allows you to build muscle, and there's so much more there too. You could do a whole episode on mTOR alone. mTOR is fascinating, the way it was discovered. I urge everyone to just go look into it. It has a lot to do with Easter Island, the person who discovered rapamycin. It was in the soil there. Pretty cool stuff. But yeah, so you have this balance, and too much mTOR activation is actually not conducive for longevity. So balancing the AMPK and mTOR in the body is a huge door for longevity.
Is this the main argument for intermittent fasting? Because I almost went into this with going back to fasting. I mean, I used to do 23 hours a day fasting, which I think in certain contexts, like being in this cold environment where I'm hitting 0 degrees Fahrenheit these last couple of days, to me, it doesn't make sense to fast for 23 hours a day, or even 16 or 18. It makes sense for me to do maybe 12 hours a day max, which I do.
I think if you staggered it.
But this dynamic is intermittent fasting, right? It's like when
so you do
in
it
between eating.
Exactly. You're engaged in AMPK. So AMPK is activated under specific stressors. The easiest way to do it, the lowest barrier of entry, is to just fast, and then you activate AMPK. Under caloric restriction, that stressor is what activates AMPK. And working out is another easier way to do it if you're into that. But there are other drugs that do it. Rapamycin, I believe, does it. Metformin, those type of drugs.
Listening to David Sinclair again, I just got his book, and he's a huge fan of metformin. It's funny, and it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with him, and they were asking me about resveratrol. And he was saying you'd have to drink like 200 glasses of wine to get the same amount of resveratrol in a pill.
Oh yeah. And I know some people who are on the opposite school of thought, and they're extremely anti-resveratrol. They demonize it. I think there's there's balance there, man. Like if you polarize something, like too much of anything can be bad for you. Like you drink too much water too fast, and that's bad. So, or it can be bad, I should say. Or negative's a better word for that. But yeah, just context. Even like with the whole ketosis thing, people think that's bad too, but they don't realize that babies are born into ketosis. They're in a mild ketogenic state when they're born. Like,
right. I've seen you say, yeah, that's interesting. So with AMPK, so fasting or caloric restriction or working out are like three ways to activate that pathway.
There's also a soluble fiber. Glucosamine is a good way to activate AMPK. Methylene blue activates AMPK as well. I've seen studies on this that show it. I think it's depending on the dose and also what you're consuming in your day to day while you're taking it. But I think all
glucosamine.
Glucosamine.
Oh, glucosamine. Okay, I haven't heard of that one. Interesting.
I believe it's elephant yam fiber. If you look it up, it'll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I pronounced it differently. Yeah, I've seen that supplement. Interesting. The polysaccharide.
Yeah, exactly. Glucosamine is great because it helps with AMPK activation. ALA, green tea helps to activate AMPK. Yeah, there's I forget the compound. I think it's like 4-letter compound or abbreviation that's in green tea that helps to promote AMPK. So if you like start stacking these, I wouldn't say it's like one of these things individually will help you activate AMPK. It's more like you have a higher propensity to lean towards this activation of the AMPK pathway if you start stacking these type of things. So you have like working out on an empty stomach, plus you're already fasted from the day before. One thing that I noticed that's pretty cool. It also has a added benefit of increasing testosterone is, skipping dinner. Don't do it too often, right? Like with anything, find what works for you and things like that. But if you want to get into a deeper fast, you can eat in the morning, maybe eat lunch, and then just stop eating after that. Don't eat dinner. And then the next day, you're already probably close to 20 hours fasted. So you can easily push that a little bit more and just work out a little bit and then refeed, and just different ways of experimenting and looking to engage that pathway. Because you can enter autophagy after about a day of no eating. 2 days is like the optimal state. So don't eat for like 2 days and you can enter autophagy super easily. But like I said, if you start stacking these things, methylene blue assists in autophagy. There's a few other things that assist in autophagy as well. You can just start getting, or like hacking, so to speak, towards your desired outcome.
Resveratrol also activates AMPK. I'm sure there's a crazy long list of all the supplements and things that does it.
Right on.
And yeah, it's a good point about skipping dinner. I just like the freedom because living way out where I do, I mean, it's always a couple hour round trip to go to town and get groceries and run errands. So that's a long time versus someone in the city, it's a 10-minute or 20-minute round trip max to get your errands done and go to the stores. So
it's more realistic.
I don't like relying on like, okay, I have to bring jerky with me. I would rather just have a shaker bottle, do electrolytes, feel amazing. Yeah. My body doesn't even know that it's not eating because it is eating, but it's eating my own fat, right? Yeah. It doesn't see the difference between that and external fat coming in.
Exactly. And if you're being active, your body's not consuming the muscle. So, I mean, it's just a straightforward game of you're consuming fat from your own fat, you're breaking the fat down. And sometimes that's great. And then you just refeed, you bring more fat in, and then the cycle continues. And then sometimes you break ketosis, and that's fine too. And then you just go back if you want to. This is all a game. This is what I like to say. It's like an MMORPG where you get to do whatever you want, man. This whole thing is a game, and you're just gaining experience, and you can fuel yourself with different things, and it's all just having that experience, bro.
Do you think there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I like to say, because I just remembered, is for a lot of the people who've never done ketosis, and then they start going into it, they start getting freaked out because they start smelling like acetic acid and acetone, and they start getting the chemical smell and they get super turned off. They don't realize that you're burning your own fat ass, I guess. And then those fatty acids that you're burning for fuel, your body is producing ketones, and acetic acid smells acetate, and so does acetone. And when you're consuming fat for fuel, your body will take whatever fat and protein, and it will create those ketones. But a lot of the byproduct isn't waste in the same sense that it is when you consume carbohydrates. So you'll actually poop less, but you'll perspire a lot more because the byproduct is CO2. And these ketones are also leaving the body through sweat, through urine, through feces, all that stuff. And that just has a smell, but that tends to go away as you go deeper into ketosis.
Interesting. Yeah,
helps.
I haven't experienced that myself. It's so interesting how it's different for every people. Like the nightly urination increase and all the stuff, it's different for different people. As you're breaking down your own adipose, like I know a lot of like metals, especially, are fat soluble. Do you think there's an increased need to take charcoal or clay or binders or shilajit
totally.
or do even protocols like enemas? Have you thought about all that stuff? Like,
yeah, those are different ways you can go about it. I like sweating in the sauna, hot cold plunging. Hot cold plunging is great. Taking things like red clover to help the lymph move. Jumping up and down on a rebounder to promote the lymphatic system to turn over. And there's so many things you can do to play with this. Chelation, that should honestly already be part of your regimen if it isn't already. And most people who listen to you probably take Shilajit anyways.
Right. That's interesting about red clover. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the sauna, and I have to get back into that. Actually researched the last couple of days, like the cryotherapy chambers. I've never done it, but the liquid nitrogen. Supposedly there's a woman that died in there. I guess it was like after hours, and she it was supposed to be a 3-minute treatment at like minus, I don't know, 240 Fahrenheit, and somehow she got locked in and like froze to death. But I guess it was an instant. Kind of a trippy story. I was like, whoa, I never knew someone.
That's crazy. She got the Walt Disney treatment.
right. Yeah, I guess there's a place in Arizona where you could cryogenic freeze your body. It's like a advanced life insurance. Have you seen that place?
In the hopes that you can restart your brain. And
I want to go there and visit. It seems fascinating. Yeah, I guess they could take your head off, and it's cheaper if they just preserve the head. It's like $40,000, or I can't remember.
It's like Futurama.
Right.
A lot of these people say that's like predictive programming, and I don't know if I really believe that. I think that have you ever seen the movie Tenet?
I haven't. No.
You should watch Tenet, man. Tenet. So essentially the gist is that time moves forward and backwards, and that time moving forward and backwards means that the end has already happened and the beginning has already happened, and it's simultaneous. And the way that time is perceived in this world is interesting, because there is no past or future. There's just now happening. But your memory, right? This is the time traveling device right here in between your temples. So we have the ability to perceive time, because time is just the movement. It's the measurement of movement of our experience. So we calculate time based off of our perception, but it doesn't actually exist. It's abstract. So the only thing that's happening is now. And at a quantum level, everything that can possibly happen has already happened, or every possibility is happening simultaneously, right? We can go so deep into that one, but the past and future happening at the same time thing is pretty interesting to me. So a lot of people think it's like predictive programming, but I think we're creating our reality, and that it's like a feedback system, right? Where our environment is intimately connected to us so much more than we even realize. And that it's not that we're being fed this predictive programming, but more so that the future is intimately connected to the present, quote unquote, because it's all within our mind. And that it gets so crazy to think about. And a lot of there's a lot of literature to substantiate these claims that the experience isn't happening without you physically participating. Like you have the standing wave and the particle and all that stuff. We can go into that if we wanted to, but
yeah, no, it's interesting how at this age versus when we were a child, our perception of time and how fast it's moving is so different. I have seen the preview for Tenet. I'll probably watch that tonight.
Something cool about what you just said, though, is that the perception of time seems to be speeding up, but it's not that. It's because we do this. We're habitual creatures. Humans tend to do the same thing over and over and over. We're kind of like cats in that sense, that we love to do what we're used to as habits. And almost every human being has habits, and we all do it all the time. That's why we have find ourselves in loops. And then once we catch ourselves by the tail, we can see, oh, I was doing that. And then we can change that. So something that is interesting to note is that as we do things, the same things over and over and over, it seems to go by faster because the brain likes to cut out all the extra noise. So the perception of time seems to be speeding up, not because it is speeding up, but because we're doing the same thing over and over and over. And that's a huge sign that we need to change things. So if you think that time is, or if anyone thinks that the time is moving faster, it just means we're doing the same thing over and over. So changing things up, you'll find yourself more in the present, and that things are actually not going fast. We're just more in tune in that moment now because we're paying more attention.
That's a good point. I had a friend tell me going camping with his daughter for the weekend last year, when you backpack out to the woods and you stake your tent and you're out there without cell service for, a couple days, it feels like forever.
Oh yeah.
And, I've experienced that.
There's a lot to say about that. And I love that, man. That is one of my favorite things to do, is just disconnect from everything. I use my cell phone for like music and stuff, but sometimes it's great to just tune in to nature's music and be present with that. Time goes by so much slower because if you think about it, you're always in these boxes that we call houses, and you're always doing the same thing within the cities. So when you go out there, it's something completely different. There's so much stimulus happening all the time that our brain just shuts out all the time. What people consider tinnitus and stuff like that, that is a legitimate thing. There is something, and it deals with inflammation. Right. I've had my tinnitus, quote unquote, substantially decrease since going keto, and all the noise just like gets really silent. And dude, I feel so much at peace. My energy levels aren't peaking all the time and crashing all the time. This like hypoglycemic and hyperglycemic roller coaster. Like my levels are just they're up. They're not like in the middle. They're up, but they're stable. Wow. And my emotions are stable as well. I'm not so reactive to things that used to really get me riled up. Now I'm kind of just like whatever.
That's
but
great.
It goes hand in hand with the nature thing, because you're tuning back into the circadian rhythm of the earth. So all that extra noise that your brain just shuts out, you're immersed in.
I love that. You're inspiring me to get back to my post-breakfast walks, because when there was no snow on the ground, it was so easy to do a little loop. And I have to put on my snowshoes, and maybe it's ice by now. It's been so cold. I could probably just walk on top of it. But I felt a huge difference. And that was before I even got a continuous glucose monitor, I was fascinated with the research on post-meal walk, just 10, 15 minutes even. stabilizing blood glucose after a meal. That's pretty interesting.
That is a real good thing to do, especially if you're under the school of thought of consuming carbohydrates consistently. Also, the order you consume carbohydrates is important as well. Like if you want to reduce the insulin spike, you can consume like fat first and protein and then glucose. I think I'm getting it right.
Yeah, the glucose goddess, I forget her actual name, Glucose Revolution. She's like trending kind of like medical medium status. It's interesting right now. And she recommends the order of food. That's her whole book. And I think it was like fiber first. So I've been playing with fiber first. And
that's what it was. It was fiber first. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do feel a difference.
Totally.
But with the glucose spikes, like I think people would look at, CGMs and stuff as being like neurotic, but I think it's pretty interesting feedback because you can see the rise in blood glucose. And if it's over 30, that's generally not good. And if the spike stays for 2 hours, and this is just Dr. Google, what it says, that's a sign of prediabetes or diabetes. If it's elevated longer than 2 hours, especially over 200, I think it's nanograms. I forget that. I'm losing track of all these different measurements of things, but I've been seeing it stabilize the longer I've been experimenting with keto. That I do like if I go out to dinner and I have wine, sourdough bread, oysters and a steak, which I've done the last couple of weeks. It's not as a huge crazy spike that lasts for hours. It just goes up and then down.
Yeah, you definitely will get insulin spike with protein, and that can actually kick you out of keto if you eat like a ton of that stuff, a ton of protein, I should say. But I think it's kind of neurotic to always be worried about that spiking unless you're actually diabetic. I don't think you have much to worry about. It's just the body responding to what you're putting in. But it is cool to see how high and when it will respond, because then you can adjust accordingly. And especially if you can correlate, you can make a correlation between when it spikes and how you feel, and you can really dial in and get some fascinating results. I think that's the biggest benefit of monitoring, in my experience, because I know there is another school of thought where they're anti-monitoring because it feels like nitpicking at everything, but from my direct experience, I've been able to hone in on quite a enjoyable experience, man. I love eating certain foods, and I'm not saying it to be like, oh yeah, you can be in keto and eat all these freaking things or anything along that train of thought. But it's cool to know that you're not so limited, because it's those limiting beliefs that tend to polarize people. And for me personally, I get tired of that stuff. It feels so monotonous and I feel so robotic, and I feel like I'm not really living my best life. But like now I'm happy. Like I ate a pizza yesterday, right? And before that, I ate the day before that, I ate Indian food. I had a chicken curry, and it came with rice, and I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So I ate the whole thing of rice. And my reading, the day that I chose to eat the Indian food, I woke up and my reading was like 1.2. And then it occurred to me to test myself after I ate the Indian food, and my reading, it was still within 1 to 2. And then I ate the rest of my curry chicken with the rice that night, and my reading went down. It went to like 0.9 or something. And then the next morning, it was 0.7. So I stayed in ketosis, and then I fasted. That was my day. Oh, my bad. I got the timetable mixed up. So when I ate the Indian food, that was 3 days ago, then I fasted for a majority of the next day, and then I ate dinner, which was, I think it was something simple like ground beef, right? And then the next morning I tested myself and my ketones were back at like 1.7. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm gonna eat a pizza today. And then so that was yesterday, right? And then after eating the pizza, it was great, didn't really feel bad. But this morning I tested myself, I was at 0.7 again. So my body's just like going back and forth. But it essentially what I'm saying is like my body and I have communicated and set a baseline that I'm going to be consuming fat for fuel. So I stay within that. Now, if I did that a few days consistently, my body would probably start using sugar again. Because as you know, your body's still going to use sugar even when you're in a ketogenic state. Your brain, your kidneys, there are a few other organs that use glucose to power them. But it's not a necessary macronutrient to take in externally, because your body will always make just the right amount.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. Metabolic flexibility is a term that's out there, and I guess the idea, if you consume predominantly carbohydrates, then you lose the ability to utilize fat as fuel in your mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
And when you up your fat and decrease your carbohydrates, you're building that machinery in the mitochondria that wasn't needed before. And so you're able to kind of run on both. Mm-hmm. You kind of become a hybrid vehicle instead of just a gas vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. Human Prius. I like Chevy, so it'd be a Dart.
I love it. Well, Sky, do you want to get into some of the questions? We have a bunch, and I'll pick some good ones here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really good one. Does long-term keto make you less able to handle and process carbohydrates in the future?
From the literature, yes. But that is also contingent upon various factors. Bioindividuality is a big one. Get your genes tested, dude. You don't have to go to Ancestry or 23andMe. There's plenty of people who have companies that don't sell your information off. Get to know you, right? So that I actually have my reading coming in pretty soon, but I've done a lot of this just based off of how I feel. And, with the results that come in, we'll have a lot of cool things to discuss. We should definitely have another talk soon, and we can dive into more really cool stuff. But I also should say that long-term is that is nuanced as well, because even myself, I've been playing with this for a year or so, a little less than a year. So if you consider that long-term, then great. Yeah, sure. I haven't lost that ability to process carbohydrates. And that's because I don't approach it from the same polarized stance that most people do, where it's like all or nothing. I see it as I want to develop that metabolic flexibility, and I want to be able to eat whatever I want to eat, right? But there's always an intention behind that, and it's more for detoxification than anything. I do it for the brain benefits, and that's kind of the cherry on top, like healing my brain, healing my body. Those are huge on my list, but metabolic flexibility is number one for sure. I would say I'm more like medium term right now, but I haven't lost that ability. The studies do show that you can develop resistance. You develop higher insulin sensitivity, and your resistance to insulin gets much lower. And so those are factors as well that you have to take into account when refeeding carbohydrates after maybe like 6 months of no carbohydrates. Again, things to take into account. Fit that in however it makes sense to you.
Yeah, and I guess defining how many grams of carbohydrates they're consuming, because is it 0? Is it 30? Is it 50? Is it 100?
Most people say 50 is the threshold. I've easily gone over like 300 grams carbohydrates, and I'm still in ketosis the next day. Dude, I know. I'm like breaking the freaking rule book, but I'm fine, and I'm still in ketosis by the meter, and I don't have the hyperglycemic insulin response. I definitely get the insulin response. It's normal, but it's different as like, I also don't eat a ton of carbohydrates anymore. Like yesterday, I did half a pizza just to see what would happen. And that's half of a 16-inch pie that I ate yesterday.
And there was meat on it, right? It wasn't just cheese and sauce.
It was Canadian bacon, pepperoni. What's the other one? Salami. There was jalapenos, pineapple, Parmesan cheese, mozzarella cheese, and tomato sauce packed with lectins.
I love it. Yeah, because it's interesting. Because it's an interesting question. It's a really good one because long-term keto. It's like if you're refeeding with carbs, does that still constitute long-term keto, or are you cycling?
Right. I think it's more cycling, but it also has to it has to do with how frequently you're bringing carbohydrates into the equation and how much carbohydrates you're bringing into the equation in that given time frame. And if you're doing it consecutively for a few days, like that also plays a part. Like for me, if I do 2 huge days eating a lot of carbohydrates, my ketones will go lower. It's happened before. I'll wake up with like 0.4 of reading, and that's on the blood prick. That's not bad. I still didn't feel bad that day. I kind of just I drank some tea in the morning. I did a little bit of MCT oil because I wanted more ketones. They just feel better in my brain. But then the next day I just stopped using the MCT oil. That's something to note. Like I don't do MCT oil all the time. Now I only do MCT oil if I'm not in ketosis and I want to get back in quicker. And I don't want to have to deal with the hypoglycemia stuff. So it's a cool little hack that I've formulated for myself. C8 MCT oil.
Interesting. Tips to get rid of insulin resistance was another question, kind of along the same line.
Yeah, there's a few ways to go about it, because the insulin resistance is directly correlated with a raised carbohydrate intake, and not all carbs are the same. Simple carbs, consisting mainly of fructose, don't really give you as great of an insulin spike when you consume them. Like some fruits, I know bananas will cause insulin to spike. So if you go higher on the fruit, lower on the potatoes and the starchy stuff, you can develop a lower insulin resistance. Going keto also helps as well. You definitely got to know what you're doing. Stay hydrated. Research keto flu. Research all the ins and outs of ketosis. Really, you want to know what your body's consuming. You're going to need a lot of sodium, a lot of potassium, a lot of magnesium, a lot of manganese. Manganese is just something that I found you just don't get a lot of in a keto diet. So
I've heard chloride as well, right? Because sodium, you can take sodium as a supplement, like an LMNT packs. But what about chloride, which you need to make hydrochloric acid? So like, I salt every single meal heavily.
Yeah, same here. I do a lot of salt. And I also do a lot of magnesium chloride. Do topical magnesium chloride on my chest, my sacrum area, behind my neck. I can go over my stack real quick. And this changes. I don't do like the same thing all the time, but my bread and butter lately has been I do B complex, I do thiamine, I do magnesium malate because it helps with the ATP generation. I like magnesium malate. It's really good for energy production. I do magnesium chloride. Sometimes I play with magnesium glycinate, things like that. I do sometimes I'll do like a multivitamin or something, but not really. Like I get everything I need from meat and organ meats sometimes. And then when I do organ meats, I don't take my B complex. I don't tend to mix those two because my B complex pretty much has a lot of the things that the like liver will have or something like that. Let me see. I take your nattokinase. I love the dissolve it all. That's one of my favorites. Awesome. Sometimes I take TMG. I take That's trimethylglycine. That's also why I don't do magnesium glycinate all the time, because I do TMG. And then I have CoQ10 in ubiquinol form plus PQQ. That stuff is amazing. Highly recommend. Like ubiquinol, PQQ, D-ribose, L-carnitine. Those are amazing. What else do I take?
It's funny. I used to buy the ubiquinol from Costco and break because the capsules are you say toxic. So I would stab them with a steak knife and squeeze the gel caps from Costco of ubiquinol.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. It's a standardized brand. I can't remember, gold something. And I would squeeze that into MCT oil. And I forget where I heard this. It was like some biohacking idea, but you're basically making your own, little lipid solution.
Yeah, you're making a liposomal. Yeah,
right.
But you need to blend it. Yeah, you can do that. You can do that with just about a lot of stuff. That's also the premise behind taking caffeine or coffee, and then you blend it with like an egg because of the phosphatidylcholine, and then you can use a lot of stuff, man. Like so many lipids you can make a liposomal from. So you just like blend it.
Have you taken D-ribose? Because I have some. I haven't experimented with it yet, because that's a form of sugar, is my understanding. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you're not taking a bunch of it. I also do like inositol and stuff like that, but I don't do it often. Not right now, man. Those are things that you can use for your mitochondria, good boosters. I do more ubiquinol PQQ now. Inositol, I haven't been doing so much, like inositol hexaphosphate. That's a good one, but again, that's also brain sugar. I love goat kefir, so every so often I drink a ton of goat kefir. Like I drink half a bottle in a sitting. The stuff is great, and there's so many good benefits. The probiotic profile is great. Lots of good lactobacillus.
Yeah, I think the fermented dairy is a great option if people are confused on where to start. I know I was. It was like, now I feel like I have more options, but cottage cheese, like the double cream, cottage cheese, I feel incredible on.
Oh yeah, or like Parmesan Reggiano, Reggiano. Is that how you say it? That stuff is great.
Cheese in general, right, is high fat, low carb.
Yeah, that's a great, dude. Exactly. Like for people who are confused about how do I do this, how do I do that? Cheese is great. Raw milk is good. You can use Chronometer.
Raw milk though. So I'm insane. I have 2 goats. One's in milk. I haven't had a drop, but I'm extreme. It's an experiment, so I'm not recommending this for everybody at all. I haven't had 1 drop of my own super nutrient dense raw goat milk because of the carbs. Because I want to keep it. Oh yeah. But yeah, I just stopped all milk just for this experiment, because I looked at how many grams of carbs are in. I forget if it was a cup or 8 ounce. I think it was 8 ounces of raw goat milk, and it was like 26 grams. I'm like, that would be all I would consume for the day if I had that goat milk. And so I just cut it out to make it easy.
Yeah, you can still consume it. Just start playing with the flexibility. I recommend, I know you're using the breath meter, do the blood prick. It's
like a Keto Mojo, I think, or something like that.
Keto Mojo is cool because you could do glucose and ketones with it. I use KetoSense. It's just a straightforward keto meter. And then just play with once a week, doing a couple cups, maybe like a half gallon of milk. I could easily do a half gallon in a day, and just see how long it takes you to get back into ketosis. You might find that the next day you're back in ketosis. It's crazy. Once you develop the flexibility, you get the keto right. It's something a lot of people don't speak about because it's so polarized in the community, but you can definitely get back into ketosis a lot quicker once you develop the muscle memory, quote unquote.
That's interesting. Yeah, KetoSense, I'm looking at it. Walmart actually sells it. I just hate pricking my finger. It's not fun. I used to have a live blood microscope, and it's just to me, that's like the most
Yeah.
painful injury is a little, even just a little cut.
So check this out. The Ketosense that I have comes with the Lancet, and it has an adjustable dial on it. I think it's 10 modes that you can put it on.
Mhm.
And it goes from like 1 to 10, or it might be like 1 to 5 or something. So anyways, it does a half steps in between each integer. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something. And then you can also do half, 1.5, 2.5, etc. So I've been playing with it on half, and I do it on my ring finger on my left hand. I'm right dominant, and I do it right. I don't know if you've ever like worked out in the field or something, and then you start developing the like peeling skin right next to your nail. But if you like pinch your finger right there, you have quite a lack of sensitivity there because you don't have that many nerves there. So if you do it like right on the side next to your nail, where there's a little bit of a fatter area next to the tip, but not on the tip, on the side, you can actually use that lancet right there. I don't even feel it, man. And then I just squeeze lightly, and I get like a tiny little drop of blood, like nothing. And I alternate sides. If I do a reading every day, I'll do the left side of that, and then I'll do the right side of the finger. And dude, it heals up within the day, even less than that. And I tried doing it same area a few days in a row. I have no compound effect. It's great. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to try that out. I wish there was another way. Like we need to get to Star Trek times where we could just scan our wrist or something. I don't know.
I think there's like a continuous ketone monitor as well. I've seen people use those. Yeah,
I think Freestyle Libre has been talking about it. It's just, it doesn't seem to be available to the public. It's interesting.
Yeah, I've seen a few guys. There's this one guy on YouTube that he had a continuous glucose. He had a continuous monitor. I think it monitored his glucose and his ketones, and he was able to graph it out. And it was on a he had a line graph set up where you could see where, you start off with a lot of glucose and glycogen and stuff. And as that gets exhausted, it's flat line where the ketones are. And then all of a sudden you start seeing they come up, and then they converge, and then the glucose goes lower and the ketones go way higher. And then they start to stabilize, and then your body produces its own glucose through gluconeogenesis, and you start seeing them stabilize. It's pretty cool. I love seeing it visually.
Yeah. This is a good question for my friend John. Does being in an AMPK or mTOR dominant state result in you being especially receptive to the opposing one once you get out of it?
I don't think one beckons the other, but I think there is something to be said about always being in one state, because too much AMPK is catabolic and too much mTOR can be anabolic. And the studies are quite close to definite that if you are in mTOR consistently, it's bad for longevity. And if you're in AMPK consistently, you're going to burn through all your fat, man. So it's a balance of going back and forth. You want to activate mTOR, especially like building muscle. Like, I'm sure no one wants to be a scrawny dude all the time. There's a time to build muscle, and there's a time to break down fat. And being in ketosis doesn't mean you're going to break down fat. As long as you're active, go on a walk, just move around. Every couple of minutes, like when I'm working, every hour, every 2 hours, I get down. I do a few push-ups. I do a few rounds of push-ups. I do like 3 or 5 sets of push-ups, and then I do some sit-ups. I do some pull-ups. Anytime I have an opportunity, I'm just engaging that. Sometimes I pull the rebounder out. I jump on the rebounder. I go for walks, go hiking. There's things to be said about that. But as far as sensitivity goes, and this is coming from just my own anecdotal experience, I engage with the AMPK pathway quite a bit through different mediums. I haven't taken metformin. I haven't done rapamycin. Rapamycin is, for those who don't know, it's a mTOR inhibitor. So from doing all that, I haven't found that I have a sensitivity to the other, because I feel normal. Yeah, I feel good. one thing I did notice is when I was doing too much AMPK dominant activity, I did start to notice I was getting a little skinnier than I needed to. But then I was like, oh, well, if I'm talking about balance all the time, I definitely need to be engaging mTOR. And for those who don't know, mTOR is activated when you do. I mean, man, it's so broad. Like a lot of things activate mTOR. But so like lipids, glucose, protein. If you consume a lot of stuff, you're just going to activate mTOR because mTOR is all about building. So
it's essentially in between meals where you're getting the benefit, I'd imagine. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So after a big meal, mTOR is active. Yeah. So you're always going to go back and forth. Unless you're just like not eating any food and you're just always like breatharian or something.
Yeah, and I think there's like to me, ketosis is a lot more practical than IF, time restricted feeding, which is
right.
A form of intermittent fasting. That I think socially, especially if you're in a relationship, you have a family, if you live by friends, it's hard to maintain that time restricting feeding window and stay social. Whereas ketosis, you can go out to pretty much anywhere and just still do it. So
yeah, dude, I feel amazing. And sometimes I won't eat in the afternoon and I get home and I'm like, wow, I feel so good. I should probably eat something. And then if it's too late after sunset, I'm like, no, I'll just wait. Because I do notice that if I eat too late, I wake up a lot groggier and like just tracking it on the Oura ring, I can see it visually. It's not the most optimal. And waking up with the sunrise is big for me. Like I wake up at like 5, 6 every day. Right now, the sun's not coming up until about 6 something. So I naturally wake up at sunrise and the sun is now out some days because it's Pacific Northwest. But when the sun was coming out super early on summertime, I was waking up at like 4 a.m. naturally. Waking up with the sunrise. And that's a huge thing that we didn't really talk about, but ketosis without sun gazing, I wouldn't say right at the sun. It's not about looking right at the sun. It's more so about exposing yourself to the angle of light that's coming from the sun onto the earth, because that is part of your circadian rhythm. So being fully in tune with the circadian rhythm while you're in ketosis is huge because you won't get the biggest benefits without that. There's a whole plethora of things that you need to be doing to get the max benefits from ketosis plus sunshine plus grounding and activity, hot cold plunging, sometimes niacin while the stem cells are out after fasting for like a day, 2 days. Things like that that you can utilize to release stem cells into the body, drive them into the brain. There's so much to play with there. And it all boils down to your circadian rhythm and the glutamate GABA balance there. That's a huge thing that I'm the most bullish on that. If I had to say, there's a lot of things that I like to dive into, and ketosis is great. I like it. But for me, it's huge on the GABA glutamate balance. I'm really big in GABA. GABA supplements kind of suck, so I don't do that. But I like to support the endogenous GABA production and glutamate turnover. If you don't sleep enough, you have hyperglutamate. That makes it hard to fall asleep. It's a self-perpetuating cycle that a lot of people get trapped in with insomnia and with blue light on the eyes all the time. It's not so much the blue light, it's the intensity of the light and the angle that it's coming at you from. Like right now, it's a little bit after high noon, so the light's up here, fine. In like an hour, 2 hours, all lights are turned off and anything is at eye level and below. And just for my circadian timing, I know a lot of people say that if you have a lot of blue light hitting your eyes at a certain time, it will inhibit the melatonin production and then you won't get sleepy. I think that's BS. It's so much more nuanced than that. it has a lot to do with the angle and the intensity that it's hitting you. Obviously, like I have blue blockers on. It's not something that is the most important, but it's pretty up there. I think there's a lot more context to take into account. But yeah, circadian is important.
Definitely, yeah. My last show was a lot on light and circadian rhythm, and it's interesting that when you search ketosis and start researching it, you read a lot about insulin and insulin resistance and sensitivity, but not a lot of people talk about leptin resistance. And I know Jack emphasized that, and there's articles, if you just search leptin circadian clock, that the leptin cycle is tied to your circadian rhythm. And so if you're right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll come to find out once you start diving into circadian rhythm that this is all dependent on the sun. The sun is it's the atomic clock, so to speak, for not only time, quote unquote, but your body. Your body is fully tapped in with the sun. And that's why it's such a disservice if your circadian rhythm is thrown off, because then you won't be able to go to sleep early. Like you'll have crappy latency. I go to sleep within 3 minutes of closing my eyes, and pretty accurately, and it's consistent. I use a face mask now. Highly recommend a face mask, man. Like you think the blue blockers are doing something for you, get a face mask. I use one that is a total blackout, and within 3 minutes, I'm knocked out, dude. And the Oura Ring tracks it. I think the most I spent in bed before going to sleep is like 7 minutes, and that's infrequent. I'm like 3 minutes, 4 minutes consistently.
Would you say even the moonlight coming through can disrupt? Because I've read that moonlight's only about 1% blue light, but I bet that total blackout.
You're only really getting an intense light from the moon when it's like full moon. Mm-hmm. If you're in if it's crescent moon, it's not so much. If it's new moon, it's not out at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could play a factor, but I think you got bigger things to worry about if you're that sensitive to the moonlight. Glutamate toxicity. You're probably smoking a lot of weed at that point. And by the way, cannabis is extremely hyperglutamate, and it causes your body to build glutamate up in your brain. So, and that's neurodegenerative, heavy glutamate in the brain. So bad for you. Sleep is great. I love it.
And you were telling me you're a big fan of GABA antagonists, and there's different ones, right? And B.
GABA agonist. Mm-hmm. So GABA agonists and antagonists are two different classes. Agonists, they bind to GABA receptors, and you have a few of those. Like you were saying, there's A, B, C. C is not talked about too much, but I'm big on GABA A. I love, I have a product that I work with personally. I make it from Amino muscaria. That's the Super Mario mushroom, the red and white one, Santa Claus mushroom, reindeer mushroom, whatever you want to call it. Those mushrooms, they're toxic when they're in the raw form. There's also debate on that, but when you prepare them properly, the main alkaloid in them is known as ibotenic acid, converts into mucimol, and mucimol is similar in structure to GABA. So when you take it into the body, it binds to GABA A receptors, and the GABA A receptor being stimulated causes an inhibitory effect. So if you're not aware, GABA is inhibitory, glutamate is excitatory, and this is why that balance is so important to me. There are so many other neurotransmitters that play a part in all this, but GABA glutamate seems to be the door, really. And I've seen a lot of study and research on this pertaining to GABA, the presence of GABA in the brain, helping to relax the body and helping the body wind down. And it's so important for proper nervous system function. It eases insomnia with people who have insomnia. So Amanita is, or I should say, the mucimol in Amanita is a great tool to play with because it simulates GABA in the brain. And there's a lot of studies that I've been seeing where GABA presence in the body, especially early in the day, is attributed to a recalibration of the circadian clock. So there's a whole conspiracy theory I could go down. I wouldn't even say it's a conspiracy theory, but I find that this is something that's never really been talked about, where a lot of ancient religions that were dealing with like Jesus Christ and Buddha and a lot of these historical figures are depicted always holding Amanita muscaria mushrooms, or they're at the feet of Jesus, and then like the sun cross is behind Jesus's head, and you can see it literally, and you can see a guy and mushrooms at his feet and the sun behind his head, and you can think whatever you want, but things are extremely symbolic. If you know anything about the biochemistry regarding Amanita muscaria and how it is similar to GABA, then if you're like me and you see this picture, when I see this picture, I see Jesus Christ, right? This figure who's supposed to be this Christ figure, the anointed one. And at his feet, you have a symbol for GABA. And then you have the sun behind his head, which is the sun or the master clock set. So you have circadian rhythm with the sun, and then you have GABA at the feet. And that GABA helps to tune the circadian rhythm. So there's a lot to be said about that. I can go a whole, like another 3 hours on just that alone.
That's pretty cool. And so the spagyrics that you make, like specifically this flygaric one, like on the website, you say it's the muscaria essential oil, the spirit of Amanita, and the mineral salts. Mm-hmm. Does it actually contain the compounds? Because when I think of spagyrics, I think of like almost homeopathic, like you're not getting the actual compounds, but you're getting...
Oh, there's different kinds of spagyrics. There's spagyric essences that are usually devoid of the active compounds, and it's like more similar to like a box flower essence, but it's even more sophisticated than those. We should do a whole episode where we can talk all about spagyrics. Fascinating stuff. But the flower essence, spagyric essence, those would be the most inactive. They just have more of the volatile compounds. So you have the highest notes if you're familiar with aromatherapy, and you'll have maybe just like a high ethanol content and the most volatile of the salts. So the most light, and there are some volatile salts. They're usually bonded to the oil, like in rosemary and sage and stuff like that. But other types of spagyrics contain, it depends on the operator really. So like when I create and reconstitute, the word spagyric, for those that don't know, comes from two Greek words that translate into I draw out and I bring back together. And that is the essence of spagyrics really, where in plant alchemy and spagyria, we take a plant. You could do it to mineral, metal, animal as well, but let's talk about plants. They separate everything and separate into the oil, and then ferment what's left over, and then that turns into ethanol, and then you distill the ethanol and isolate that, and then you take the leftover plant material and plant juice that you distilled the ethanol out of, and then you calcine. That's a word that just means like you set ablaze, burn it until it's a white ash, and then you can draw minerals out from that. So the end product has nothing wasted. You use the whole plant, and you have pretty much no waste because everything is utilized and reduced down into an oil, a spirit, which is a liquor. That's where we get the word spirit from, spiritus. That's why we call them alcoholic spirits, because ethanol is a spirit, and it's very volatile. You leave the lid open, it just flies away into the air. So you have the oil, the spirit, which is the ethanol, and the salt. which you get from the plant matter that was left over from everything else. And then you reconstitute those in a specific process that gives you a sort of alchemical liposomal end product and it just depends on how the operator does it, because you can make it to where it has all of the active compounds in it. You can make one where it's just tincture, so it's only alcohol soluble compounds. You can have one that has like the water soluble compounds as well, and the list goes on. There's so many ways to go about it, but the Amanita one that I make has a full profile. The way I make it ensures that it has the active mesomol content, and it also has some of the other lipids that aren't as volatile. I include those in there as well. Really cool stuff.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I was telling you, I think before we started recording, that I've been playing around with red wine again, and it's the dry farm stuff, keto friendly, quote unquote. It's like half a gram of sugar less per bottle or something.
That stuff is great. I love dry. Dry is my favorite. Even before I was keto, it just tastes better.
Right. Yeah. And it's so funny. There's a lot of speaking of polarizing, like we were talking about earlier about drinking alcohol, and there's the Al Ghul memes that the New Agers share. And, it's like it's going to take over your mind. And
when you actually understand where that word comes from, it comes from Al Ghul, and kol is the word for antimony in Arabic. So when the word actually comes from Al Ghul. Al means the, kol means antimony or spirit. And they call it spirit because antimony is a metal. It's a volatile metal that when you heat it up, it actually turns into a gas. And then when it cools down, it turns back into a solid. So, and it's volatile. It has these fumes that in alchemy they call the dragon's breath that actually can kill you if you inhale. So a lot of this stuff is code. A lot of people are extremely ignorant and they don't understand alchemy and they don't want to understand it. They just want to stay ignorant and say, oh, it's a flesh-eating spirit. It's like, or they call it a body-eating spirit. And it technically is a body-eating spirit because it eats the body of whatever you imbibe it with. So you can make ethanol from just about any plant. You can ferment grass if you know how to do it, and you can get ethanol. You won't get a lot though, but you might get like not even like a milliliter, but it's there. And that ethanol can be used to extract the body of whatever plant. It's a solvent made by plants for plants, and it's safe to consume in small amounts. It helps to drive medicine from a plant deeper into the cells. It's a good delivery system for plants. It takes a plant essential oil that would normally only be active for about 2 hours in the body and increases its efficacy to about like 12 hours.
Wow.
So it's
it's interesting, Sky. I do so much better on red wine, the same source, so that, there's not a huge amount of variables. I'm not buying different brands of red wine. This was like 2 or 3 years ago, eating tons of potatoes because I'm in Idaho, and why not enjoy the potatoes? That was my thought, with red wine. And, I did like a glass a night 2 or 3 years ago, felt pretty bad the next day. And lately, even without biohacking it with Z-biotics and DHM and different things that I'm doing to mitigate the effects of alcohol, even without doing any of that, sometimes I still feel really good the next morning after drinking a glass of wine. So I'm just saying the difference between eating carbs then and drinking wine and being keto now and drinking wine, so different. I feel like I can handle it a million times better.
You and I both. And I'll say this, and I don't do this often. I'm actually across the board. I'm pretty straight edge. I don't do drugs really. I've experimented with stuff in the past, but like even cannabis and alcohol and stuff like that, like I don't do that stuff. It's not frequent at all. I might smoke cannabis here and there. And lately, the last like couple years, I haven't really touched it. but I feel amazing. So I feel like it brings me down. And whoever said that you get high on cannabis must have been really low, because when I smoke it, I'm already really high and it just brings me down. But
Right.
smoking on ketosis is way different, man. Me and my roommate, he found it out because he's also keto, and he was smoking one day and came up to me. He's like, "Yo, man, I got to tell you, smoking on ketosis is a whole different thing, because ketosis actually reduces cortisol, something we didn't mention earlier, but being in ketosis, that's a common misconception some people have. They think that ketosis is stressful because it's correlated with raised cortisol. That's actually not true. Your cortisol goes down during ketosis. A lot of people are scared of the liver stuff. I have zero problems with my liver. Actually, restricting calories for a little bit actually increases bile production, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I have way better liver function now than I did before. And people trip out about the whole fat thing. But if you know about cannabis, you know that cannabis is an oil soluble. It's an oil soluble compound, active compound. So the cannabinoids are oil soluble. That's why usually you have to use like carrier oil or something. If you look at cannabis itself, it has a rich lipid profile. It's got a lot of oil. You touch it, your hands get sticky. That's the oil. And it seems to be something about like oil metabolism is just like way superior during ketosis. I'm telling you, man, I smoked a lot and I felt like, how can I say it? I felt like enlightened, man. It was crazy because before I would smoke cannabis and I have a threshold. I only smoke a little bit, a few hits, and I stay in a good range. And if I surpass that, I get too much glutamate going on. I feel super neurotic, and I'm like, and my legs get really shaky. And there's a whole lot of stuff that I just don't want to experience. But this time, my friend did it. He was like, yeah, man, I kept going, and I just wanted to see how high I could get and how much I would need to smoke to get to that place. And he said he just kept smoking and he just kept getting higher, but completely controlled, where he had no anxiety. I was like, no, man, you're kidding. He's like, no, man, try it. So I did it. Sure enough, man, no anxiety. I prefer being sober. So I was just like, well, I could do this. It's cool. I think if I sat down to like make music or something, it's a nice little touch on the ambience for me, but I don't need it.
Yeah, I look at it as a premier painkiller, which I think it's widely available.
Oh yeah, cannabinoids are great.
Yeah, versus prescription, and I look at tobacco and alcohol the same way. It's like they're tools, and you can overuse them, and there's way different. There's levels of quality, right? I mean, it's a spectrum. It's not just the same across the board. There's all these different qualities, but I do think people overuse CBD, and I think that's not really necessary for most people. Like CBD oil, I think is a ridiculous fad.
I think if you use it in certain contexts, like paired up with ketosis and intermittent fasting is great, or like fasting in general. If you fast for like 2 days and you want to work out, it's a great anti-inflammatory. Cannabinoids in general are just amazing. Just the fact that the body has more cannabinoid receptors than any other receptor system is interesting. We have there's a lot of different cannabinoids that you can work with. There's a cannabigerol. There's as you know, like delta 9. There's the delta 8, which is not that's a whole other thing. But then there's like PEA, palmitol, ethanolamide. Then there's anandamide. There's a lot of different stuff to work with. There, it's not just THC, right? Delta 9 and THC.
And exercise makes your body release cannabinoids, right?
Yeah, totally. There's palmitol, ethanolamide in eggs. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, it's in eggs. Wow. Yeah, but your body makes it itself. Your body makes PEA on its own, but not high amounts of it. If I'm not mistaken, and like CBD, PEA, these are anti-inflammatory. So if you want to reduce inflammation, a lot of people's problems actually is just inflammation, really. Mm-hmm. So like all the itis, it's all inflammation. Mm-hmm. So if you reduce inflammation, you relieve a lot of the symptoms of different things. Man, that's a whole other topic as well. Inflammation.
Well, we'll have to do another one. I think let's wrap it up here, Sky, and just share your website, thearcanum.io. I'll put a link below where people can check it out. And you have some coming soon products. Datura, I see that sounds pretty potent.
Oh, yeah. So Datura is that's not something that anyone should be consuming, but this is an essence. It doesn't have the toxic scopolamine and atropine compounds that are synonymous with Datura and Brugmansia. There's something called the devil's breath. It's a drug that it's pretty common in like Colombia and Southern American states. These compounds render you so delirious that you're susceptible to any suggestion and like you mindlessly follow. But yeah, so it's just a flower essence. I love the way it smells. Mm-hmm. The flower is beautiful, so it's a good way to interact with it without any of the toxic compounds. But I have other things. I have I haven't even pulled I have a few things on the catalog. Like you get methylene blue there, the Amanita muscaria spagyric. Mm-hmm. I have like different rosemary, ginkgo biloba, hawthornberry, lotus, reishi, red clover, rhodiola, and so many more other ones. And I'm working on the site and bringing a little bit more of an educational perspective and really helping people build an understanding with alchemy, because a lot of people think it's just a precursor to chemistry, and it is that and so much more. Yeah, there's so much beautiful things there.
I love it. Yeah, I'll have to try. I haven't tried 90% of your stuff, so I'll have to order them, try them out. Huge fan of ginkgo biloba, so that's high on the list.
Ginkgo is so great for what is it? Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF.
And you like the animal spagyrics too, right? I think I got some from your friend.
Raven. Yeah, he's awesome. I do. I've used quite a few of them. It's definitely something that is a bit more for people attuned to subtle energy, but these influences, they can be pretty loud sometimes. You take it and you think, oh, it's just a animal essence. What is it going to do? But then all of a sudden this theme starts to become extremely noticeable in your reality. And it's all associated with the animal totems. So if you're familiar with the animal totems, like, oh, I just saw a hawk. Well, I wonder what the message is. This is like that on steroids. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think I have barred owl. I have tarantula, raven.
Nice.
I think coyote. I think I ordered all the different animals from them. And
oh, nice. Did you get the fox?
I don't think maybe. Yeah, it's interesting though. All the different you pretty much gain the attribute of the animal. I know years ago I listened to a live talk on spagyrics down in Southern California at my friend Seema's house, and he was talking about the different animals, and which like the tarantula weaves these really intricate webs, which can be useful for some people.
Totally. You see what I mean? It's super symbolic, but it's literal. These themes become quite apparent in the experience. So working with those is a fun way to interact with your experience, your reality. They have metallic essences. There are also metallic spagyrics. I wouldn't consume those if you don't know who they're from and if you don't have a quality test on them. That's something that myself and others in the community are looking to bridge into this field. Is lab tested metallic essences and metallic spagyrics. That's essential oils derived from metals and minerals. It's a
I
real
think
thing.
I have the oil of tin, lead, copper. Those are the main ones. I probably have a few more, but it's
Nice.
funny. You wouldn't think that taking the essence of lead is good, but then you look at all the properties of lead, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's claimed to be a way to detox, like the metal toxicity of the specific metal that you're taking. So, like if you
Wow.
took oil of gold, it would bind to gold particles that are laden in the body and help to expel those. That's what they
Wow.
say, right? And maybe there's literature on that. Only time will tell. But that's why it's also great to get a oil of the metal that's been lab tested,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's just the pure lipids and it's not containing any of the metallic salts, because some metallic salts can be toxic. I'm working on a few that are not toxic. So like magnesium salt binded to the oil, that's going to be really good. And I have that in the works. Also a potassium one. So I'm working on a spagyric of magnesium, spagyric of potassium. That I'm going to get creative. It's not just going to be straight spagyric. I'm gonna bring my favorite forms of the metallic salts into a nice concoction that's fun to play with. That's also alchemical in nature, and it's also extremely beneficial on the biological level. Exciting stuff. Especially, I'm like super big on magnesium products, and potassium products are great as well.
That's really cool. I love it. Yeah, years ago, before I knew anyone that made things like this, I went to People's Co-op, is my health food store
In San Diego.
down where I grew up. Yes, San Diego, and I would buy the flower essences, and I think the 5-flower essence was the one that I slammed. Went through several bottles of the 5-flower, and was a big fan of it. Definitely felt some effect from it. So. And then I was raised with homeopathy. My mom would always give me homeopathic remedies my whole childhood. So
Like cell salts and stuff.
yeah, yeah,
That's
those
enough.
little white tablets. Yep,
The little Highlands tablets.
right. Yep.
I'm working on some of those as well.
Oh, cool.
That's a little bit more nuanced. There's so much that goes into that, and the way these metal compounds react to different acids and solvents. It's tricky to get it right, but yeah, that's in the works as well.
I love it.
I have that coming out soon.
That's exciting. Well, Sky, this was fun. We covered a lot of ground, and if anyone is curious about ketosis and maybe they've tried it, I think we introduced a lot of new things that they can consider and meditate on. There's just so many details to it. It's pretty fun.
Dr. Google is your best friend. Don't take anyone's word for it, really. It's something you got to try for yourself if that's something you want to, and do your own research, really, like with anything. Don't take anyone's word for it. Study.
I love it. Awesome, Sky. Well, thanks so much, and put the links below where you guys can check them out, and stick around as we close out the show.
Sweet.
Well, that is all for today's show. I like that Sky addressed a lot of the myths around ketosis. If you go off of it, you're going to rebound and gain all of the weight back. The myth that ketosis is inherently stressful. I think there's so many variables going on that to make blanket statements like those doesn't take into account all of the different factors that can be involved. Psychological and emotional stress, just to name a few, that can really affect weight gain and really make nutrition obsolete. I've been getting so many questions since I've started experimenting with ketosis the last couple months and just sharing my experience, not telling everybody that they immediately have to go low carb, but maybe getting a CGM and seeing if you're on a roller coaster of blood sugar spikes like I was and pre-diabetic, then maybe not going zero carb, but going lower carb can be beneficial. I am a big fan of the continuous glucose monitor that's been so eye-opening to see how different foods affect me. And what spikes you may not spike me, and vice versa. And spikes are not bad. It's just if you have spikes all day long and all night long, that is bad. And if they are prolonged and if they are above 30 milligrams per deciliter, that is not ideal. I used to research very heavily glycation, and then I did my high carb experiment, which was the pro-metabolic experiment, which is high carb. Even if I'm eating steak every day, it is still high carb. And that increases glycation in the body when you're consuming that much sugar. And I'm not talking about sucrose. I'm talking about fruits, honey, maple syrup, quote, healthy sugars. No matter what sugar it is, that has the potential to increase glycation. But again, there's so many variables. Maybe you react better to one of those than I do, and you react differently to it when you have a big salad first and get in the fiber first, and then have the carbs last. That will have a much different effect. So I love all of the details and nuance to this whole discussion. It's really great. So it was really fun to speak with Sky about this. If you want to check out his work, you can go to thearcanum.io. He sells methylene blue and a bunch of different spagyrics. I've been having a lot of fun with those, adding some drops and sometimes an entire vial into dry farm wines, low sugar red wine. And I definitely feel the effects. They're really fun to spike your alcohol with. That's one of the ways they've been traditionally used. I don't have any affiliate link or discount code for his website. I just like supporting good people. So go and check him out there. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You could read about my CLF protocol. And if you click shop, you can see all of the recommended products. I'm getting back to updating that semi-frequently. And a little update, my espresso machine that I currently have up on the website there, the Barista Express by Breville, recently stopped working. And I thought descaling would do it, so I descaled it several times, and it still would not pull a good espresso shot. This thing has been a workhorse for me the last 2 years. It's gone through multiple moves across the country and has performed fairly flawlessly, and keeping up with descaling every once in a while with the solution or with white vinegar. But something happened to where it just stopped working. So I decided to upgrade, and I had a bunch of people send me recommendations. So I'm trying out an Italian-made machine that's on the way, but currently I'm just doing the old-fashioned pour-over and French press, unfortunately, with Walmart materials, what I've been using the last week. But I have some good Hario stuff on the way. So just wanted to be transparent there. I think 2 years of daily hard use on that espresso machine's pretty good for $700 US. But if you're really serious about your espresso, then you're probably going to have to spend much more than that if you want a machine that's going to last a really long time. And perfect timing for this show, I recently added Ketone IQ, which are exogenous ketones, to the website. These things are miraculous. So, quick story. The other night, I went out for Valentine's Day with a loved one, and I ate some bread. And I've learned the hard way that bread makes me very sleepy, even if I have a big steak with it and have all of my macros balanced and I'm very well, fully nourished or whatever. I get destroyed with even sourdough bread. So I was driving home. It's a fairly long drive home because I live in a rural area. And I was literally falling asleep on the freeway, which is very dangerous. You could kill other people or kill yourself. It's a horrible situation. And whether you're an iron deficient person or someone that has hyperglycemia or prediabetes or full-blown diabetes, you know that feeling very well. And so I was having a hyperglycemia episode with this huge prolonged spike. And I pulled over and pulled the cooler out of my truck because these shots are better cold. And like magic, I shot it back. And literally within 30 seconds, no exaggeration, my brain switched back on. The tiredness went away. And I was 100% alert for the rest of the 45-minute drive back home. So this is a tool. It's not to be megadosed. They're very explicit on the website with these ketones, that 1,3-butanediol, to max it out at 3 a day. And I think there's some context there. I think I've heard Ben Greenfield say on one of his shows that he can pop 3 of these at a time, and measuring his ketones, that is optimal for him. I personally space it out just to be safe. I've only ever taken 1 at a time. Although they are very safe, you'd have to drink a lot to cause what's called ketoacidosis. But if you spread out your doses, it's fine. And I use it as a performance enhancement tool, especially for speaking. So before every time I get in front of the microphone, I take a shot of this stuff, and combine with my Shilajit Panacea purified, third-party tested resin tablets. Pop 5 of those. That's what I do. I do some coffee, MCT oil, cream, lion's mane from Alpha Dynamics. And then I pop 1 of these, and my brain is really firing. And then you could, of course, add to that stack if you can handle the brain activation. So I am really grateful that I found those ketones. They're just amazing if you plan on carb cycling, let's say once a week, twice a week, where you go out and eat. And if you're driving, you don't want to be drunk off of carbohydrates, to pop 1 of those and see if you get the same effect that I did. I'm personally not going to leave home without those anymore. Another product I added is Z-Biotic, and that is a pre-alcohol probiotic. Drinking alcohol is very controversial in the health field now. I see comment threads where a ton of people say it's pure poison, it should never, ever be consumed. And I think there's more to health than what we consume physically. Perhaps even more important is our emotional and psychological health, which is why it's so important to not engage with trolls online, to block them without a second thought, and really protect and shield your emotional and psychological health, because it is precious. It is free to do so. You don't have to buy any product. A lot of it is just putting the phone down when you're with loved ones, taking time off of social media if it is stressing you out and you're in information overload, and maybe even having a glass of high quality red wine, like a Malbec, which is what I prefer. Ideally, a foreign Malbec when I'm out at a restaurant. That is what I go for first. And you have a Z-Biotic with you. They're these little shots, and you take one before you begin drinking alcohol, and it actually helps the body process acetaldehyde, which is the main culprit in causing a hangover with drinking alcohol. And I am developing a drinking stack. There's other things I've come across recently that are very intriguing, way beyond thiamine and vitamin B3 and B complex in general, which is incredible before you drink alcohol. But some other things, I might even create a Mitolife supplement with all the things I'm finding around it, because it doesn't exist. And I'm not really impressed with the combination supplements for drinking on the market. But if you just took this one, you will probably notice a difference. So if you use the discount code Blackburn, that will save you 10% on your first order. Then an old product I added that I've been using for the last couple of years. A lot of people probably don't even know it exists because I don't talk about it that much, but I'm obsessed with it. It's called Total Clean. And this is by my friends over at Hypo Air. My first Mitolife Radio podcast several years ago was with the good people over at Hypo Air. So this is an iodine and copper-based spray with proprietary surfactants that actually break down odors and stains. So anyone with pets, especially dogs, if they tend to urinate or defecate inside the house, this is an absolute game changer. Or if you have children, which the same thing could happen, another game changer. But it's just infinite uses. I spray my bathtub with this after every bath and shower, and I feel really good knowing that I'm maintaining the cleanliness of that sacred zone that I really decompress in. This is also great for your car to spray your upholstery, spray your car in general to refresh the smell. I use it in the chicken coop. You know, when it's not freezing temperatures outside, you could just keep it in your chicken coop and spray it down once a day. It's incredible how well it works. So if you want to try that out, you can use the discount code Blackburn. And again, that's Total Clean on my website. And then if you want to check out my supplements, you can go to mitolife.co. And under the wellness section, you'll see all the different supplements that we have available: vitamin E, vitamin K2 without D3. We have a spore-based probiotic, digestive enzymes, systemic enzymes, desiccated beef liver, oyster, ascorbic acid, aka vitamin C with polyphenols. We have magnesium, and even grounding sheets if you click on living. That is a great product to experiment with, especially if you live in a rural area. You can really enhance your sleep quality, or just a low population area. That is the ideal place to use grounding or earthing sheets. Or even more ideal is when you're camping. A lot of people never think about that, but just putting a grounding rod outside of your tent and routing that through the zipper onto your bed so your bear skin is on the silver threads. That is a really great way to camp. And then if you click water, you can get a preview of our 7-stage water filtration unit. It's going to be a under counter, and we are working hard on that behind the scenes. A lot of things are happening to line up everything and get this released by next month. At least the pre-production run and the initial units. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it. Of course, the Mitolife Academy members on YouTube are going to get first dibs. And then after that, we will open up ordering to the public. So thank you for all your support. Thanks for sharing the show with your friends and leaving a nice comment. And I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.